Hello, my name is Cody. Welcome to the Unifying Field podcast, where we journey beyond the black and white into the vast spectrum of human experience. Here we explore the great question of why we are here, seeking wisdom in all traditions and unity in our diversity. My mission is to bridge worlds, uniting hearts and minds through conversation, curiosity, and the shared wonders of existence. So take a deep breath in through your nose, open your mind, and join me as we step into the infinite together. Well, I would like to welcome my second guest on this podcast, which happens to be somebody I grew up with, which is very exciting. I don't think I've talked to you since maybe college back in 2006,
Yeah, I would argue it's been at least that long.
It's been a while. It's almost 20 years. So, um, yeah, very exciting. So, everybody, welcome. Do you go by Charles now? I know you as Adam from back in the
Um,
day.
Most
Or,
people call me Chuck just because it kind of like fits my personality better. I'm definitely not a Charles. It's kind of like a posh British person. It's like, hello, my name is Charles. Pleasure to meet you. That's not really who I am. I'm pretty simple.
Awesome. Yeah, one of my memories I remember about us growing up, I was really big into model rockets at one point in my life as a kid. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Came over and we shot model rockets and stuff. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, that was good times.
You got to
Simple.
think, we're what, 20 years from that now. Do I still like rockets? Sure, I love rockets. But kind of the innocence of youth has been kind of lost since then, I feel like.
Yeah.
We're almost 40 years old. Think about that, man.
Oh, good grief. I couldn't remember how old I was, and I thought I was turning 39, and I was like, man, I was about to have a midlife crisis. But then I put in a birthday calculator, and it said I was turning 38. So I'm like, oh, okay, we can worry about that next year.
Yeah. No, don't worry about that right now. I just had to do this. I had to get my driver's license because my birthday's December the 2nd. So you have to get it right before then. And I looked on it and it was an 8-year license. And it said 2033 will be the next time I have to get a license. I'm like, geez, man, that's like, I'll be like 46 or something like that. That's nuts to
Wow.
me. And by that time, I'm definitely going to need glasses, and I'm sure I'll have paid off something and assumed some more debt. And there's going to be all sorts of weird life experiences that have happened in that time frame. But we're getting old, man. Time marches on. The longer you survive, I guess, the older you get naturally. So,
Yeah, I know my daughters definitely show me how old I feel. Man, tough. They've got so much energy, and I do not. Like,
yeah. No, it just happens. Eventually, you just start. I mean, you can stay in shape. I try at least to stay mobile and stay active, but you just don't have the same energy that you did in your youth. I think it was like maybe 28 or so where I started really suffering from that. Like, oh man, things are hurting now and stuff. So,
so you started a YouTube channel,
yes, I
which
did.
is
Uh,
really exciting.
it is exciting. Yeah. I started a YouTube channel not too long ago, maybe what, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. But I've always really wanted to do a YouTube channel. And it wasn't necessarily because I like the idea of people watching me or I like being a star. I really just wanted to like share with people what I was into. And you think about like making videos. I made a few like videos about video games when I was younger and stuff. It never really was anything serious. I kind of did it just kind of I guess I thought I should. But as I got older, I saw a lot of people that were sharing their experiences, and I thought, man, I've seen a lot of really cool, interesting things, even just like locally where I live. I thought it'd be really cool to give my take on that. And I've taken just a little bit of a break from it because I hurt my left foot. I have plantar fasciitis in my left foot, so I haven't really felt like running around and filming. But this week, since I've got the week off, I'm going to try to film another episode. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Your YouTube channel actually helped inspire me to create a podcast too.
Hey.
I was like, saw on Facebook you started posting or sharing your videos, and I was like, well, that's awesome. I'm like, I need to get off my butt and actually do something too. And
Mhm.
my friend of mine who was actually on the first interview that I had, we had talked about when we were riding motorcycles a lot. We were talking about doing either a YouTube channel together, or a podcast talking about motorcycles and music and that kind of stuff. And we never did that, but we may do that.
It'd be a good idea, man. In my opinion, social media is one of the ways that you can truly be influential and be relatively successful in a market that, if you're honest with it, like you're really honest about what you're doing and you're sincere about the kind of videos you're making, you can make big waves. There's a lot of like over editing, AI, a lot of people that are just trying to make a buck off of it. I think the success really lies in just being really honest and sincere about what you're doing.
Yeah, being authentic. I keep hearing that. Be authentic. Just be
Exactly. Yeah.
yourself.
Mm-hmm. So, are you going to do it? Is the question. You've actually got to put up or shut up at this point.
I may. This takes a lot of time as it is. Like, it doesn't take a ton of time to make a set of questions about for an interview type of episode. But if I'm doing like, so after this, I may record this other lesson, which is going to be called "Man-Made God and in His Image," and I may do that one next. But that one's taken me several weeks of working out ideas, and so this is something that, talking to my brother, for example, he always like he would listen to me talk about my philosophical ideas and things, but he would be like, "Man, I have no clue what you're talking about. Like it's so difficult to follow your ideas because you're all over the place." I'm like, "Okay, there we go. There's some good feedback." So I need to organize my ideas. So I need to put pen to paper, or type things out and figure out how to do all that stuff. And it takes a long time, prepare an episode, but it's a lot of fun. So
it is fun, yeah, but you're doing it the right way. There's a lot of people that would rush into it and not organize themselves, and they would put out a product that would be so far out that nobody could relate to it. That was kind of the first like problem I had when I started making YouTube videos. It's like, man, is this really cohesive? Is this really like, is the clip that I put in the video, is it necessary? And it's even harder with a philosophical ideology because you have to find a commonality, a base, and you often have to use metaphor, and it has to be a coherent thought process that goes from one step to the next. I do not envy you, because even just trying to explain what I believe, it can sometimes be difficult for people.
speaking of that, so speaking of having audiences that actually halfway understand what you're talking about, that's another good thing about YouTube and podcasts and all that kind of stuff, is because you don't have to worry about anybody around you who is like we were just talking about a little bit ago, that doesn't want anything to do with what you have to talk about. But you can find your audience. You can find the people that want to hear what you have to say, who are interested in those types of things. And that, I know that was a huge thing with my show, and which I haven't really promoted it yet. I'm getting ready to, but I was waiting to get to about 10 episodes and then start trying to do Instagram and whatever, TikTok, and try to figure that out. But speaking of figuring out, your audience, all that stuff, what's your channel called?
My channel is called Adventure Time with Chuck. And I want to say that the URL is like youtube.com/adventurechuck. So it's relatively simple. And it's got like a little, graphic of me riding a mountain bike, which I tend to do in a lot of my episodes. So it's pretty relevant.
And you do a lot of videos on like the parks and stuff and hot springs, but you've also branched out to other places too.
That I have, yeah. The big AI boom has allowed not just myself, but a bunch of people to be creative. So if you had an idea and you were even remotely like relevant with, video editing, using any of these AI assets, like the ability to produce music now through like 11 Labs, or the ability to produce images and videos through things like Google Flow or whatever, you could actually throw together a video pretty easily if you have a vision. You can subscribe to services that are paid, or you can usually pay per generation depending on what kind of AI client you're using. But it allows people that don't have a whole lot of technical expertise. Let's say they're not good at animation, they're not good at like conceptualizing drawings or whatever. They can go ahead and get their ideas fleshed out and try to make a video that they've wanted to make. And I experimented with it some. It is still labor intensive, but it's probably less so labor intensive than if you were to use like traditional means to make videos. But yeah, I made a video about what it was. a dream that I had whenever I was in college and I was skipping class about a dragonfly that was like rampaging the countryside and killing people. And I've got some other ideas, but um, there's kind of a big backlash right now, like this idea that somehow because you're using AI, it's not as genuine as like true artistry, which sets up for debate, I guess. I can understand how this probably has the same feeling as like mass-produced items from China versus like artisanal items produced in the United States. But I'm willing to use it because I don't intend to try to fool people with it. I'm trying to use it just as a simple way to be creative, not necessarily as a way to bamboozle people.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's one of those things like AI is here to stay, and everything is moving extremely fast, you know, and either you learn to use it, and you can use it at the minimum, but learn to use it, or else you're going to get left behind because everybody else is going to be using it. So use it to help make you more productive, or at least that's my opinion on the thing.
No, it's going to be necessary in the future. If you're in any industry, I would say it could be anywhere from like engineering, animation, media creation. Uh, I think it's going to be involved in almost every field. Coding, I know that you can go write programs right now and not have a lick of coding experience because I've got a friend of mine who makes his entire living off of building websites, doesn't know anything about coding. If you don't have the capacity to at least utilize AI, you're shortchanging yourself, especially if you're like a freelancer,
Mhm.
because it can make it to where you can conceptualize something and have an actual working example of what your idea is, and maybe a fifth of the time. And as far as coding is concerned, or any like maybe engineering, I could see how it would probably be the same way. There's no ethical dilemma necessarily with those, because the people's work that led to that AI program working the way it's supposed to, uh, they're getting paid for that. It's not like where you have AI that's trying to learn how to draw things or generate videos, how it might be taking jobs away from artists because it's sampling from not only all of their source material in order to learn, but it's also directly taking the job away from them that you might try to hire them for. There's a lot of AI that doesn't have anything like that going on. The people are already paid for the service, and it's just making it much, much easier to conceptualize and realize ideas. So the future is definitely AI driven, but I do think that it's being utilized pretty poorly currently. I don't think it's being used to its full potential.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that is just because it's like this race that's going on. So yeah, it's there's going to be a lot of problems that are just gonna. I don't know. It's going to be crazy. There's a lot of unknowns right now. I know, especially like with the job market and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything to do with computers is probably going away.
It is, yeah. I think I can't remember who exactly said it. Maybe it was in like the NYT or something, New York Times. They'd estimated something like 20% of white collar jobs are going to go away because they can be handled by AI.
Yeah, that's crazy. And my dad was talking about it. He was like, "Well, you just got to go to the trades." I'm like, "Well, that's true." I just think of this idea: we're gonna have 300 million plumbers, and we've got 150 million toilets. Or something.
I don't know if that's the answer either. I think hmm, a lot of people have talked about ways to solve the problems with possible unemployment and human labor kind of being taken out of the equation. I know that a universal basic income was a big deal. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Another idea is that you need to become obviously proficient in things like AI, but really the people that are going to exist are the people that service like machines and stuff in factories. Those are going to be like a big deal. Like you're going to need multiple technicians to service the hundreds of machines that they have or whatever. So
Until the robot technology is up to par, and then
yeah,
like nobody's safe. Like
no,
eventually,
realistically,
everybody.
no. But that's what you want though. You want people to be able to focus on things that are above and beyond menial tasks because okay, as an example, I work in a factory, in a window factory. A lot of those tasks could be automated. They really
Mhm,
could. And I want people to have jobs, but at the same time, I want everybody to have a better job, if that makes any sense.
mhm.
Um, how do we get to that ideally Star Trek level society if we have a bunch of people still like, pulling stuff out of toilets and doing whatever else, really menial tasks. Um, but it's not to say that everybody will be up to those tasks either, like really technical, like coding or whatever. Not everybody's going to be geared for those either. So I really don't know what the answer is going to be. I guess maybe hospitality could take a bigger leap than it does already. Maybe personalized services. I don't know exactly where it's going to go.
Well, I don't remember what channel I heard this on, but there's apparently a robot that can clean your house for you, like literally do everything, folding or doing dishes, folding laundry, everything. But the AI for it is not up to par at the moment. It's a $20,000 machine, and somebody has to control the thing remotely, which sounds like a terrible idea. But eventually, that robot is going to be able to do everything on its own. So maybe we just all do art and sing and well, and Elon Musk in his interview with Joe Rogan, he was talking about his vision is not just a universal basic income, but a universal high income, because he envisions his AI Grok being able to get rid of the national debt because we're able to be more productive and sell more goods, export more goods, whatever. And so the big question is like, okay, then nobody has anything to do. Then what do they do? That's going to create a new problem. And it's like my thinking on that. So maybe his idea is, this crazy pipe dream thing. But my idea is that we're programmed to act like ants serving a queen, and that's just programming. As technology has advanced, we've gotten past we used to ride horses, and now we drive in cars, and we're about to maybe fly in our cars. I don't know. Who knows, man? It's that's gonna be interesting.
I find myself being fairly pessimistic about people like Elon Musk. I'm going to talk a little bit about him because I do have opinions on Elon Musk. Uh, it's really nice the idea, at least, that somebody thinks, oh yeah, we could provide a fairly universal standard of living for everybody. But man, like the sheer amount of corruption of the
Oh
ultra
yeah.
elite, I don't know that I would. I don't think there's a single person on the earth that can resist that temptation to be powerful and then to abuse it. Uh, Elon Musk is no exception. I think that Elon Musk has moments where he's probably like, yeah, I could totally do this for people. But then at the same time, he's like, oh, I'm worth $400 billion. I
Yeah.
can do whatever I want. So pass the ketamine over real quick. I'll have a good time or whatever. I definitely don't trust anybody in the government. And,
Yeah, I
and that
don't either.
stands for both major parties, Democratic or Republican. Although, like, in theory, I would probably lean more Democrat than Republican. But no, I don't. It would have to be such a virtuous person to trust with that kind of responsibility that that person would never seek riches or power. We have a leader come around like that once every 1,000 years, probably. The only one I can think of, and it's anecdotal because I don't know that it's like just accurately recorded history. It was like what, a Marcus Aurelius or something like that. Duty above self. So I don't trust Elon Musk. I think he's a bit compromised, anyways. His heart's been hardened a little bit.
Yeah, I think they've all been compromised. They all say they're going to do something good, and then I don't know. Maybe they were, in order to be up there, you've had to have gone to Epstein Island and all this other stuff, and they'll only let you run the country if they've got something on you. So I don't know.
It's all
Anyways,
interconnected. Yeah, I agree with that entirely.
let's see. Um, so one idea I had, and before I get to that,
Mm-hmm.
my computer's on. So I'm in this like made this little tent thing to try to help with the audio quality, and it's kind of cramped.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm in my second bedroom, which is really just a storage room plus like it's got a couple other places set up for me to do crafts and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
really don't have any room to speak of. If you see behind me boxes and stuff, that's almost out of necessity because we've just not done our due diligence in trying to clean the area up, but it works. I don't know. I don't. It doesn't sound terribly echoey. Then again, I can't really hear my own audio.
Going back to the idea of AI taking over all the jobs, there's two movies that I have been feeling like they're like documentaries, biographies, whatever the right term is for the way things are going. And one of them is Idiocracy. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I love it. Actually, it's a great movie.
And the other one is Wally. Have you ever seen Wally?
Now, Wally's the one I haven't seen, which is odd. You would think I'd seen it, but I kind of get the gist of what it is. I've seen enough clips and stuff to know what's going on.
So essentially, it's about this little robot that it's like recycling. That's like its little job is it's recycling, and the whole planet is just full of trash. And Earth is just vacant, pretty much. And all of humanity is on this giant spaceship thing. And I guess they're waiting, from what I can remember, they're waiting for Earth to be inhabitable again. And so forget about the robot for now. The main thing I'm wanting to focus on is humanity. And everybody is just riding around on these little flying individual recliner things, one-seater recliner things. And they've got all these screens in front of them, you know. And so they've got everything they want to watch is right there in front of their face. They have their giant Coke or whatever it is. And there's robots all around them, and like they're pretty much oblivious to anything going on the ship or in the world because they've just got their screens in front of them. Anytime they run out of their Coke, for example, another or a robot comes over there and fills it right back up, and they get to the point where they're too out of shape that they can't even walk. So something ends up happening into the ship, and they all fall off their floaty things, and they can't even walk. You know, it's hopefully we don't end up like that, but I can
Yeah.
kind of envision that.
Well, it's definitely a good critique of modern society, isn't it?
Yeah.
It may be. I'm gonna probably poke a little bit at older people. It sounds like a boomer's vision of what modern society is, if I were to be honest. You know, you think of the people from like 50 years ago, let's say like that would have been kind of boomerish. Maybe more like 7 years ago would have been boomers. They were the kind of people that were like, I remember back when I was, like at my house and my mom would throw us out and we'd go take sticks and beat each other with them or something like that. That's such stupid shit like that. And it's not that bad. You see more people now taking part in like recreational running and like hitting the gym and stuff like that. We still have that desire to be physically capable, but there's definitely something to be said about people being overstimulated, especially by like technology and electronic devices and whatever the newest video platform that isn't TikTok, that people are looking into now. So I think there's some truth to it. I don't know that there is like 100% truth to it. I think it sounds like a boomer's vision of what he sees from his kids as he sits there and reads his newspaper in the morning for like 3 hours and drinks coffee. So
Yeah, it's more of a not like a current situation, but it's more of a possible scenario. Hopefully it doesn't go that route. Hopefully I don't know.
it's more prevalent than it used to be. I know right now Mexico is like by percentage one of the fattest nations in the world, and the United States can't be far behind. And I know that the culture of the United States is definitely one of consumerism and not necessarily a one of action, because you're not really a good taxpayer if you don't go back and forth to work every day and provide what you can for your country in that regard. Um, it's definitely not encouraged to be as adventurous as it used to be unless you're doing it for a reason. I don't feel like you're encouraged to be active unless you're putting it on social media. It's like, what's the point of running a 5K if you didn't post about it on Facebook? So I see that part of society failing a little bit, failing like people. If I had a piece of advice for anybody, I would say pick up a physical hobby, don't post about it on social media, and try to enjoy time with friends and leave your electronic devices at the house if at all possible.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we're struggling with today is too much time behind the screens and not enough time just going outside, or actually even people who go out to eat and just stare at their phones the whole time, missing out on that human interaction, which I think pretty necessary for humanity's survival. And
We're definitely social creatures. We've got to interact with one another.
yeah, absolutely. We got to pause for a second because I got to upgrade this thing real quick. So
Yeah, go ahead. Give me a
fortunately,
second to
it was
crack another
like
drink.
your Zoom meeting is about to end unless you upgrade. I'm like,
What the heck?
all right, guys.
Hey, there we go. This meeting has been upgraded.
All right. How was your experience buying Zoom products today? It says negative or positive? Definitely negative. I didn't want to buy Zoom products.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. You were about to get shut down. By the way, how did you feel about having to pay for more time, you consumer?
Shitty.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Let me get out of the way. Okay. We're still okay. Yeah, we're still. So I would like to bring it back to spiritual stuff now. And you mentioned Marcus Aurelius earlier. So I know we talked a little bit before, and you talked about Stoicism. Is that how you say it? Stoicism?
Yeah, Stoicism.
Is that who, like, I know he had the book Meditations, which if I remember correctly, I've only looked a little bit into this, but that was like his journal entries. Meditations was like his daily journal entries or whatever.
Mhm.
Was he an emperor or king or what was?
He was a Roman emperor, and he was the last of what was called the five good emperors in Rome. I want to say he died in like 190 CE, so 190 or AC, I guess I'd say after Christ or something like that, or AD, after death. Yeah, it's AD, 190 AD. And he had ruled for like 19 years. He was an extremely prolific, well thought of emperor because he was very level headed in how he governed, and he didn't really partake in the extravagances that you would often see emperors of that time take. Like, I think Emperor Nero was a really good example of an emperor that just ruled horribly ineffectively and did nothing but have orgies and drink wine and eat cheese and stuff. But yeah, meditations were his daily journal entries whenever he was actually a general for his armies. So he went on a no, it wasn't 19 years. It was a 10-year quest in order to settle uprisings. I want to say in the area that is like modern day Turkey. So he just effectively fighting the barbarians. That's what they called anybody that wasn't Roman at the time. And yeah, he had these daily meditations because he was a Stoic, where he would write down journal entries and he would try to evaluate how he was handling himself. And he would use Stoicism to help keep his uh, actions aligned with his values, or what they would call virtues, effectively. And he's not the only one to practice Stoicism. Obviously, he learned it from somebody. I want to say that the first person that really espoused Stoicism was Zeno. He was a Greek philosopher, and he was a contemporary of people like Aristotle and Socrates, I want to say. And there were several philosophical ideologies that kind of developed around the time. There was Epicureanism, which is, if you know Epicurus, he was the god of like food and of good times and
Oh,
living the good life, basically. And then there was Cynicism, which was really pioneered by like Diogenes, I want to say. And it completely believed in a lack of material possessions. Uh, it was anti, I want to say like resource gathering, anti, like riches, and it was anti empire as well. And he lived an extremely weird lifestyle. He lived in the streets basically as like a philosopher that did nothing but completely live by his own moral code, which was hate the rich and reject anything that was, I want to say selfish, because he was very selfless in that regard. So Stoicism is the one that really kind of took hold, and the Romans definitely ran with it. I mean, other sects probably ran with other philosophies as well, but Seneca the Younger was a proponent of Stoicism. Um, I want to say that Epictetus, I believe. I don't know how you pronounce his name exactly, but he was also a Stoic philosopher as well, a Roman philosopher. And it really is a great philosophy for people that want to figure out how to not only change and improve the way they handle life, but also how to moderate your emotions and how to deal with what you can and cannot control. Those are really the biggest proponents of it. Or not components, not proponents, I should say. And they believed in following four virtues, which were wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. So wisdom is a really simple one. It's like they considered it knowing right from wrong effectively. That would be the knowledge of good and evil, which is actually similar to Christianity in that concept. Uh, Courage is the ability to live by what you believe, regardless of how people judge you or regardless of the outcomes. Um, Justice is treating everyone fairly, regardless. Don't prejudge them. And then temperance is moderation. So that'd be moderation from excessive drinking or, like sloth. Because a lot of the philosophies that exist in the Bible, they're fairly universal amongst all religions, you end up noting.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a spiritual philosophy per se, so much as it's a really just a great guide to live your life by, because they didn't use it as deity worship. They didn't use it to explain the afterlife. It was simply a way to try to live a good life as they defined it. So you can be a Christian Stoic if you wanted to. I mean, you could be
Yeah.
like a Muslim Stoic. It doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, I want to say Stoicism has been adopted by modern people. There's a Christian Stoic movement, but also there was a movement called utilitarianism, which was based off of Stoicism. And it was about things being useful and about not wasting time and a bunch of other things of that nature that were very in line with Stoicism.
Well, as far as my understanding, my current understanding, I don't think this is really going to change actually, but my understanding of spirituality versus being religious is being religious means following dogmas. So Christianity believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior and that he died for your sins, and that's it. You're set. You're good to go. That would be being religious. Nothing wrong with that. But spirituality is more, to me, it's more action based. So, like you might hear me say quite a bit, is absolutely pray, pray to your God or gods or whatever. Pray, but do something.
Mhm.
Like it goes hand in hand. And then to the point of the knowledge of good and evil, that brings me to that wasn't really Christianity. It was more of the Gnostic thing because Christianity, that was man's fall from grace, is when Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But the Gnostics believe that that serpent wasn't actually like the devil or whatever, Christianity believes it to be. They believe that was the first incarnation of Jesus, if I remember correctly. So completely turns the tables of, oh, could be Satan, trying to entice man to disobey God. But instead, if it was Jesus trying to give us knowledge of our enslavement, that we're just completely unaware of, that completely changes things. So that's kind of a Gnostic interpretation. So which I I lean more towards that. I'm not a Gnostic myself, but there is some things that I like about it. So
That's an interesting take. I think I've heard somebody mention it before, but it's an interesting analysis of what is a very distant tale that kind of fits into I guess I would call it the base of humanity. Um, I have an opinion of the Bible just like everybody else, but my opinion is probably different from most people's because I'm kind of an atheist, and I'll say a weak atheist. I'm not going to say a strong atheist necessarily. Um, the Bible, went at first glance to somebody that doesn't have faith, looks a bit irrational. Um, it looks like, at best, it's a character study of humanity throughout the ages. So it's interesting, the idea that Jesus was the one that set this into motion. It would make more sense, actually, in my opinion, because when I think of the reasons God created the universe, they have to have some sort of basis in uh, more like logic and reasoning than just I did it to do it. Like, why would God create the universe? That's a question that we've been asking a long time. Understandably so, because it's the ultimate question, in my opinion. Why are we here? Existentialism. So at least it makes sense that there was a catalyst that was influenced by God, because the idea is that Jesus and God, at least in spirit, are the same. But it doesn't give a question as to the why. Are we an experiment, or are we the realization of God's dreams? What are we exactly? I don't understand. As far as I know, the Bible never really answers that. The Bible simply says we were created, we serve a purpose, we exist, and it doesn't really go into much detail beyond that. Maybe because people at the time when the Old Testament was written weren't asking those questions. I really don't know. I'm not a historian in that regard.
I'm definitely not a Christian myself, but I say definitely. It's more. I'm still around it. My family. My wife is Christian. My girls like to go to church, so I go to church sometimes. I went a couple of weeks ago,
Mm.
and I still enjoy the music. I keep an open mind. I listen to the sermon, and I'm not most of the time I'm calling bullshit. In my mind on a lot of things, but sometimes, like this last time, the message that the preacher was talking about, what he was explaining, even though I didn't agree with how he was talking about it, I was like, oh, that's alchemy. He's literally explaining spiritual alchemy, you know,
Mhm.
the transformation of lead into gold, which is the transformation of ourself, completely upgrading our consciousness, as we work on ourselves and that kind of thing. I know Christianity believes in worshiping Jesus, though I don't think they follow his teachings. Like they worship Jesus with the last name Christ, which I do not agree with. Again, to each their own. Everybody do you, you know.
Mhm.
But that's not what I believe. I know there's a lot of people like me more on the mystical side. That's what I would consider myself as a mystic
Mhm.
these days. So Jesus is the man. Christ is not his last name.
Mhm.
You'll never convince me of that. He is not Jesus Christ. He's Jesus the Christ. And even then, I think he was, because he was a teacher. So if you get rid of you got I don't know, you really have to. Do you meditate at all? Are you familiar with meditation?
Yeah, I definitely have dabbled in meditation. I don't know that it resonates with me as well as some other people, but I definitely do believe in the idea of meditation. I think it's very effective for some people.
Well, looking or reading the Bible through the lens of, from the still state that you would reach in meditation, where the mind is completely, get rid of all the nonsense, the programming and stuff that the world tells you is the truth, and read it for what your intuition tells you. And my intuition tells me that the Christ is, for lack of better words, the soul in all of us. So the part of us, the image that God made, in Genesis, God made man in his image. So that image, that spark within all of us, is our direct connection to the infinite, whatever you want to call it, God, universe, whatever. And I think that's the Christ. It's also called the Christ consciousness. So he wasn't saying, hey, here, look how awesome I am and worship me and all this stuff. He was trying to teach us. And that's the way I view Jesus. I love Jesus. I absolutely love Jesus. Get rid of all the other junk out of there, and he's got a lot of good stuff in there. And
Oh yeah, I'm actually going to agree with you entirely. When I look at the Bible, I would say that there's very little of it that is actually non-productive. If you just take it simply as teachings, Psalms in particular is one that I like Psalms because it completely removes any of the religious intonation. It just becomes basically fables. They're lessons. That's kind of what I think of the Bible as, because the Bible is a supremely good study of humanity, especially at the time that it was written. And I think there are some things that are universal and that extend beyond time, as far
Hmm.
as humanity is concerned. Uh, and I appreciate the viewpoint that you have, much more so, I think, than traditional Christians, because I like the idea of thinking that Jesus had good intentions and that he was a person worthy of admiring. And I actually tend to agree with that, because I don't, as far as the recorded things Jesus did, I don't really recall him being a hateful person. I don't recall
No,
him
not at all.
calling a, like, obviously he was a Jew, so he acted like a Jew, but that didn't necessarily make him a bad person. He never used that Jewish identity that he had to be hateful or whatever. Matter of fact, he was righteous at times. That was a really good thing to hear. There are some other figures in the Bible that I'm not particularly big fans of.
Hmm.
Paul, in particular, I don't like Paul that much.
Me too.
Um, was Paul? Paul was the eunuch as well, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he was a eunuch.
I,
Um,
yeah, I don't know.
Well, the reason being is because Paul was talking about, like, um, the seven deadly sins. They're really just culminations of all the sins that have been noted in the Bible, and they encompass lust. They encompass sloth. All of these
Hmm.
basically sins that keep you from living a good life, which is surprisingly similar to Stoicism. But that's beside the point. Uh, Paul was a eunuch, number one, and he said, I can't remember if I don't want to paraphrase something and not have it be accurate, but he had said something like, was it like, if your eye sinned or if your hand sinned or something, cut it
Cut it
off,
off. Yeah.
cast it away. I want to say Paul said something really extreme like that. And then also he was really, really harsh on homosexuality and a few other things. And I didn't like that, because the apostles seem to be way more hateful than Jesus was, at least, in a few instances like that. And I can't even talk to the Old Testament. The Old Testament is just an insane book.
Hmm.
It's like the same as, like, Greek mythology or whatever to me, as far as I'm concerned. It's like nuts, talking about Samson, who grew his hair out and had the strength of 100 men or whatever. That's a little bit above and beyond what I would consider reasonable. At least the New Testament is grounded in reality. And a lot of the teachings of the Old Testament, at least they talked about the true nature of man and the evil that he was capable of. But there are certain parts of the Bible that I'm just like, man, that doesn't seem virtuous to me. It seems hateful. So I have to be really careful about it. But I appreciate your viewpoint. And I actually like the idea that you're talking about the Christian consciousness, because even if you don't think of it as a literal link between people, you can think of it as an influence that rippled through time and has affected the way people think about one another. Like, it was a wake up call to be kind during a really barbaric period in history. Like, killing was seen not only as commonplace, but just like it was the same as, it was cheap entertainment effectively at
Hmm.
the time. Like, killing people was just, that's something you did. The Roman Empire was really big about just, whenever, like, a public servant didn't do a great job, you would just have them go commit suicide, like drink some hemlock tea or whatever. So uh, Jesus was a major influence, and I think that he forced people to face their humanity. I wish that there wasn't as much, I'm just going to say, nonsense attached to Christianity as there is today. There's a lot of hatefulness that is, like, reappearing, and it kind of disappoints me.
And my next episode that I might record after this, I'm definitely going to be talking a lot about that, because that's about what I say, the man made God in his image. So it's a play on the God made man in his image. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go pretty hard on religion in that episode. And it took me a lot longer to finish it. And I thought it was because I got busy, but no, it's because it's pretty dark.
Mm-hmm.
And but going back to Stoicism,
Mm-hmm.
that sounded a whole lot like shadow work, which I've been getting pretty heavy into here lately, and has actually been a game changer in my spiritual work. Because a lot of my work, like, I've been meditating for off and on for the last 10 years or so, 10 or 11 years.
Mm.
And meditation helps you get high. It raises your consciousness level, and you can be in these beautiful states, but then you get knocked down and you're like, why couldn't I stay? It was so great up there, but then you get knocked down, because life hits you. And that's just the nature of this reality, that we find ourselves in, even though I don't believe that this actually is reality. But shadow work. So if you truly want to rise in consciousness or raise your consciousness, I believe that you have to work on the whole person. You can't just work on the good things. You can't just rise up and then you have all these things about you. So, like with Stoicism, you mentioned addictions, for example, or overdoing things, which pretty much is addictions. So,
Mhm.
eating too much food, being too lazy, all those different things. Those are parts of your shadow self, those things that we don't like about ourselves. But those are the things that are going to end up pulling us back down here to this reality. So if we want to raise, we got to do something kind of like what Jesus taught, or what the Buddha taught, or what any of them, Marcus Aurelius, whoever you want to look up to as a role model. You have to work on the whole person, and also consider um crap, keep losing my train of thought on this.
It's hard to follow sometimes. Yeah.
There's like multiple aspects of this that I'm trying to lead you
Mhm.
through. I may just have to come back to it as I think about it.
Yeah.
But
Loop around and make some notes for yourself. That way, maybe you give yourself a better path through. Uh,
but the
you
whole
were talking about like stoicism as a way to meditate or as a way to raise yourself spiritually. Um, I do find it interesting that you put it that way. Uh, I think of stoicism as a beautiful method for coping with reality. But if you don't think of reality as the ultimate reason, for existence, if you think that there's something greater or higher than this consciousness that we experience, I could totally see how you could utilize stoicism to do that, because stoicism, I think the main focus of stoicism is to align your virtues with how you act. And if you act with virtue, eventually you'll live a happy life. Because that's the biggest reason stoicism exists. Is it was I want to say, I'm going to try to sum it up in the way that this book summed it up that I was reading. They have, what is it called exactly? They have what is called happiness, but they call it a specific Greek word. I can't remember the word for it exactly. But the way that you reach happiness is through three different things. It's through being virtuous, following all the cardinal virtues that I told you about earlier. Um, it's also through being in harmony with the natural order and reality as it is. It's called logos, and I think that has to do with maybe a little bit of the divine as well, but it doesn't really specify what the divine is. And I think that's the reason why Stoicism kind of ends up being like an open ended approach to other religions. And then I want to say the other one as well was, I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was maybe it was a utilization of time, if I'm not mistaken, because of time being a finite uh, thing that you'd only have so much of that you need to utilize. I'd have to get back to you on the specifics of that specific, like that area, but effectively the whole idea of having these virtues is so that you can make sure that the way you act is in accordance with the way you think. So at the end of the day, if you said, hey, did I act with virtue? Did I act with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, and all the things I did today? And you see that something wasn't in line with that, you can think, oh, well, I need to do better in the future. I need to really focus on that aspect of myself. Like maybe I ate a couple of pieces of pie as opposed to one piece of pie. I didn't, demonstrate that temperance. That's a simple, really simple example, but it can help you with really complex moral conundrums as well. Because wisdom, for instance, knowing the difference between, I think they don't say good and evil. I think they say good and bad specifically, because I don't know that the concept of evil was as present in Roman society as it was maybe like until after Christianity became a big thing, maybe like third century, fourth century. And Marcus Aurelius was not alive whenever Christianity was massive. He died well before that. but it leaves it open ended, and it really lets Stoicism interface with religious concepts in that regard, because good and bad, that's subjective right away.
Yeah.
Justice can be subjective based on the culture that you participate in, so on and so forth. So really, that's why I like Stoicism, is because you could be completely atheistic and get exactly what you need out of it. It's a really practical guide to approach reality. You can be Christian, and you can use Stoicism to help really refine and focus the way you act and make sure that you're consistent with yourself and your actions. You could be a Muslim and be a Stoic. It's really interesting in that regard. And it meshes well with my atheism, just because it's a system to organize myself. Like, it's a system to make sure that I'm consistent with who and what I want to be. Because my sense of good and evil, good and bad in this regard, not necessarily evil, because I think evil has a religious intonation. Good and bad would be more in line with my empathy, as opposed to like a religious intonation. Like, I've been told this is a sin, this is not a sin, so on and so forth. So even if you weren't necessarily like open to the idea of a different religious ideology because you feel Christianity or Buddhism, I think Buddhism is as much a philosophy as a religion, you might be able to integrate Stoicism into this framework you have and use it kind of as like I would call it almost like an operating system to integrate more into the weeds of Christianity, or whatever religion you have. So it's interesting in that regard, and I would encourage people to get into it just to try to help moderate the way they approach reality, because that's exactly what I use it for. I use it very practically. Um, I think it could help anybody almost just deal with reality, and make sure that they're acting consistently and they're getting the best results out of life they possibly can.
And you're holding yourself accountable by journaling every day, and you're putting
Mhm.
putting it on paper, and pretty much putting yourself on trial in a mini trial. Like,
Exactly.
there doesn't
That's
have
what
to be any
it's about.
judgment, of
Yeah.
course. It's just, okay, here's what happened. And really, going back to shadow work, that literally is shadow work,
Mhm.
which this is going to tie a whole bunch of stuff together here in a second. But literally, one simple way of doing shadow work is, at the end of the day, journaling. How do you feel? Like, a set of different questions, whatever.
Mhm.
Was there a situation where you acted in such a way that you could have done better?
Mhm.
And you just put it on paper and become aware of that. And you're like, okay, now I know something I need to work on. And we keep doing this to help make sure we're in alignment with how we want to be,
Mhm.
I guess.
Yeah, there's an extreme parallel right there. That is exactly what meditations are. That's the whole idea of it at the end of the day. So it seems like they're literally talking about the same thing. They maybe just got there in a different way.
And so, the shadow is a Jungian, Carl Jung philosophy thing.
Mhm.
So, are you familiar with him?
Yeah, yeah, they're very familiar.
And so I haven't finished the red book. I'm like a quarter, halfway through. I don't know. I had to put it down for a while. I got busy.
Mhm.
But yeah, so basically the shadow is all of the unconscious things that you don't like, the stuff that just your baggage, I guess you would say. Your
Mhm.
persona is the mask that you put on and you wear and show the world, and then you have the anima or the animus. The anima is the, I may get these backwards. I want to say the anima is the female side of a male, and
Mhm.
then the animus is the male side of the female. And what little I've read from Carl Jung's Red Book, it's like these conversations with these different aspects of himself and his soul. It seems like he's saying that the soul is the opposite of whatever gender you are. So his soul is female. And so maybe that's the anima. I don't know. I don't know it well enough to
Mhm.
make too many comments on it, but it's very interesting. But the shadow work was definitely something that was a game changer for me, and that, where I said that it would bring some things together, is shadow work and that kind of stuff is done in like the pagan religions and the witchcraft and all that stuff. It's alchemy and shadow work and all that kind of stuff, and get into the dark goddesses and all that kind of stuff. They're really good at it's all about alchemical transmutation of the being of yourself to, I guess, ultimately achieve enlightenment or whatever it is that you're going for, whatever is the highest possibility as an individual. So
When you talk about that, it kind of sounds like meditations, but with mushrooms. Nothing wrong with that. They use a psilocybin and a bunch of other like LSD to help people PTSD and stuff nowadays. But
ibogaine was a
yeah,
recent one.
it's a big deal. Yeah, and it's effective as far as I know. I mean, I've seen some clinical trials, and it seems
Mm-hmm.
like it has a fairly high level of success. But again, it's amazing how similar the things you're saying. Maybe they have different twists or whatever, but they sound very similar to like a whole host of ideologies that other people follow. Uh,
Absolutely.
it's basically what I'm saying is there are no original ideas.
No, there's not. And
Yeah.
these 100+ books on my bookshelf behind me,
Mhm.
they're all pretty much saying the same thing, just from
Mhm.
different cultures, different ways. Like, so me being more of a mystic, like I've gone to Buddhist sermons and meditation retreats and stuff, which I love to do. I need to do another meditation retreat
Mhm.
because man, you just feel so good afterwards and around a bunch of whole like-minded people and stuff. And with the monk up there doing the teachings of the Buddha, like I can see Jesus up there teaching. Like it's the exact same stuff, a little bit different words, a little bit different culture
Mhm.
of the teachings, but it's the same stuff. So
There's
it's
only so many ways you can rehash humanity. Really, I mean that's the truth. We have way more commonalities than we do differences, even between like cultures that are 3,000, 4,000 miles away from one another. We have a surprising amount of commonalities. The differences usually end up being cultural. Very often, you'll see the differences are simply in how we legally treat one another.
Mhm.
That's like China has a really big culture of not helping people because they're afraid of uh, getting sued. But but people want to help each other. Generally speaking, everybody feels empathy. The people that don't feel empathy are the sociopaths and the psychopaths that exist.
Mhm.
Uh, so to believe that we're not talking in every religion about an aspect of humanity would be silly. So I can see the commonalities. And I can even understand how meditation helps. I'm talking about true meditation where you try to like really clear your mind and observe yourself in a way that you can't observe yourself by just stopping and thinking about what you are. I do often throw shade's not the right word, but I do often question the spiritual links that are above and beyond what we can realize, like physically, like, literally sitting right in front of us, because I've never really had a spiritual experience. Uh, I've had lots of experiences with what I probably could identify as my subconscious mind, which I think a lot of people do not know how to get in touch with other than through dreams. Um, I'll share a really personal experience. Um, let's see, it would have been 13 years ago. My father committed suicide. This is a pivotal moment in changing who I was as a person. Changed a lot about me. But I remember for the next month, maybe 2 months after he had killed himself, having lots and lots of uh, dreams. Obviously, you would have dreams, but I remember seeing lots of like physical manifestations of things that weren't really there. Like my subconscious mind kind of inserting things into my reality. I don't think it was inserting things literally. I think it was inserting things in my perception of reality. Some of that could have been sleep deprivation because I know I didn't sleep particularly well after that. But I never for once thought that I was reaching into some sort of distinct spiritual realm necessarily. I always thought that these were the horrors of my mind staring back at me. It was a weird realization to have because I had to think a lot during this time. I'd actually quit my job and a bunch of other stuff for about a month and a half, 2 months, when I started working again. But uh, I would think that if I was going to have a spiritual experience, it would be surrounded by like one of the worst things a person can experience, like the suicide of a really close family member, but I never felt any spiritual anything. I never felt anything strange other than the things that are expected of somebody under extreme duress. But I definitely got in touch with my subconscious mind in a way that not many people will unless they experience just absolutely just destructive trauma to themselves. But I feel at times I feel left out. I feel incomplete because everybody says they have all these experiences and I don't experience them. And I can't explain it because it's not like I don't feel like I'm closed minded to it necessarily. I just feel like it's never happened to me, which is weird. And I can't dismiss, and then I said I was a weak atheist earlier. I can't dismiss the idea that something exists above and beyond what we see. I can't, because I realize that there are things that are completely out of our perception, anyways. Uh, there are entire bands of light that you can't see that are ultraviolet or infraviolet. You can't see them. So you already know that you're experiencing reality in a limited way. You can't hear certain sounds. A dog will hear a sound you can't hear. So you know that you're limited, at least in physical perceptions. So of course, why wouldn't we be limited in other ways? You know, like our ability to sense certain types of energy, our ability to peer into possible alternate realities, because theoretically they exist. You know, it's a thing that a lot of people don't really get about science. Science is explaining at its upper limits some really weird concepts that are definitely beyond perception. You know, you can't see them physically, but I've never had that experience. And I'm going to relate it to something much simpler. It's the same feeling I got when I see people playing musical instruments. I don't feel the connection to music that they do because I've never experienced it like that. It's one of the reasons why I was motivated to learn a musical instrument, because like, I was like, man, I want to feel connected. And the way that gone ham with drugs, to be fair. I haven't done mushrooms or anything because I don't just musical searching. I would like to actually, because I have had limited experiences with drugs. My drugs were pot, coke, and laughing gas. Those are the only things I've ever messed with. Laughing gas is a weird one, right? But they do. I had a weird epiphany when I was doing laughing gas in particular. I simply said to myself, "Oh, I understand the point of drugs now. It's just to alter your perception of reality." Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's simple. It's a really simple realization. But when you have that realization and you realize that, for instance, like LSD or mushrooms or whatever can really break down your perceptions of reality, I can understand why you think that might be the link to a spiritual experience. Someday I'll get to do that. I really do want to do that in my lifetime. I hope it's a good trip, man. I really do. I don't want to have a bad one, but I wish I could have that experience because I feel like I could relate to people more so if I really had a spiritual experience. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm not a militant atheist, but man, I haven't had that experience yet, and it bugs me sometimes.
I completely get that. I have done mushrooms a few times. I've had some good trips, and I had one really bad trip. And I was actually thinking about it today because one of my regular podcasts to listen to, they were talking about a bad trip that they had, and I'm like, oh, that, it kind of helped me make some sense of my own. And that's been about 12 or 13 years ago that I did it. Way too much, and yeah, I don't know. I may talk about it on a future episode. Maybe get down
entertaining for sure
into the details of it. But as far as the spiritual experience, like I know my uncle is the one who got me into meditation. My uncle has lots of stories of him and his brother, like him, my dad, and their other brother, and even my mom got into meditation in the 80s, like before I was born. And which is kind of crazy, which I think I figured out that might be why they didn't push me into Christianity growing up. It was just sometimes we go with the friends, go to the, what is it, lock-ins for overnight at the water park or whatever, Wild River Country or whatever it was in Little Rock, if that's still open. But they would tell me about like blasting off. They would go into meditation, they would just blast off out of their body and just crazy, like really fantastical things. And that sounds fascinating. Let's do it, and then I get into meditation and yeah, that's never happened to me. And I'm like, I've come to the realization, like, it's just, we're all going to get to experience different things on different levels, and maybe one day we'll get to experience something really crazy, but not everybody's going to just, as soon as you close your eyes, you've left your body and all this stuff. Not everybody is able to do that, and that's okay. But I can feel energy, and I think a lot of it has to do with, like you were talking about, being able or not being able to see the light spectrums, and also we can't hear very well. So the work I've been doing has made my psychic senses start to open a little bit, so I can start to hear a little bit. I'm starting to see a little bit, just little glimpses here and there. Nothing too crazy. Just the little things that are starting to happen, which is progress.
Mhm.
But in the beginning, I think the biggest thing is we've got to get the mind to just shut up, because your mind is constantly trying to get you to think about things. They say the mind has 60,000 thoughts a day. That's very distracting. You try to meditate, you're trying to focus on something, and like, focus on something for 3 breaths. And then all of a sudden you're like lost in la la land, thinking about this thing you've got to do, or man, I wish that person didn't say that, and such an asshole. And why did I act this way? Why did I'm like, oh crap, what am I doing? I'm all right, we're gonna stay focused,
Yeah.
2 breaths in, now we're back lost in la la land. And it's very difficult. So when you train that muscle, eventually your mind quiets down and you start to get to be familiar with who you really are, and I think this is part of that cross consciousness. We got to get the mind, that's part of the ego, the personality, this part of us that makes us this human creature, that tries to help us survive here on earth. We got to get that to quiet down, shut up, so we can get to work. And once you quiet everything down, then you can start to hear, and then you go deep into meditation, then maybe you can start to see a little bit. Now, I know I've been having a lot of ringing in my right ear here lately, and I know it's not tinnitus. So I'm thinking, based on everything I've seen, it may be spiritual contact attempt, that kind of thing. But I haven't been able to figure out what it is exactly. But the quieter you are on the inside, the more you're able to listen, not just to something talking to you or whatever, but your intuition. Your intuition is your guiding voice, the voice that you should listen to, not your thoughts that say you're a worthless piece of crap and all this other stuff. Like, yeah, get out of here with that. But that knowing, that's not the easiest to explain, but
No, I can understand what you're trying to get at, and I understand it's the ability to communicate with yourself in a way that you can't otherwise.
hmm.
Yeah, I get that entirely. Like even in a practical concept, I can really understand that. It resonates with me. Uh, I do have something to ask if you've ever heard about. Have you ever heard about tulpas before? Do you know anything about tulpas?
That's something I was actually thinking about getting into. I was going down this rabbit hole idea, but yeah, go ahead with what you want to say about it.
Well, obviously, tulpas are a thing that maybe they're not really present in Western culture as much as they are, I think, in Eastern culture. But I've read a lot of. Okay, so obviously, I was a big browser of 4chan back in the day. Everybody knows what 4chan is, hopefully, at this point.
Mhm.
And there's a bunch of green text stories on the, I want to say it's like the supernatural forum. I can't remember. It was called X. And I think it had to do with supernatural and cryptids and a bunch of other stuff like that. So I'm totally into, by the way. I love that kind of stuff. UFOs, UAPs.
Are they
Uh,
demons? What are
Now, tulpas, and yeah, well, tulpas in particular, I theoretically I could only say that they're a manifestation of your subconscious, realistically.
yeah, yeah,
That's what most people ended up coming up to the consensus about, like if you look at it from a practical perspective. But some people experience that unintentionally as well. Like some people, schizophrenic people in
yeah.
particular, they experience their subconscious mind speaking to them. It's not like a physical manifestation. They don't see a person there, but they do experience their thoughts, but they don't realize that they're their thoughts. They sound like a foreign voice, effectively. That's really what they found out that schizophrenia is: your thoughts, but you can't relate them to yourself. They don't sound like they're yours. And there is even a further kind of like exploration of schizophrenia. People that have schizophrenia that are deaf end up seeing hands, like hands that are just sitting there signing to them, talking to them, because they don't have the concept of speech. So I know that the subconscious mind can play a huge part in this kind of stuff, where you imagine things and you see things. It makes me wonder if when you try to create a tulpa, which is, in my opinion, just a kind of like a physical representation of your subconscious, if it isn't like almost eliciting a type of schizophrenia within yourself. And it makes me wonder how many people in the past that have been spiritual leaders may have had some sort of neurodivergent property that made them really good spiritual leaders. Anyways, I just kind of wanted to mention the tulpa because you were talking about meditation, and it made me think that sounds really familiar. It sounds really close to that ideology.
Well, and actually with tulpas too, so a lot of people, especially in the occult world, will, I want to say the tulpa is the right word that you're making. And this guy right here,
Yeah.
Mr. Crowley here, you would make a do some kind of a ritual and then shoot some energy out of your, like, your umbilical cord, or your, you don't have that anymore, but your
Yeah.
belly button,
Mm-hmm.
and shoot out this energy form. And then you would, I don't know, you would build this thing, this creature, whatever, human,
Mm-hmm.
energy body, give it a name, give it a job. And then I don't know too much about it, but you would put it into, I mean, you could put it, give it a house,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And yeah, it would be a servitor that could do things for you, it could work for you.
Yeah.
But it's like yes, like a projection of your own consciousness created into
Mm-hmm.
a tulpa, pretty much. So
Yeah.
tulpa would be like an individual thing, and then an egregore would be more of a group level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, aggregate. Just the base of the word alone implies there's multiples.
Yeah.
Um,
So like Santa Claus would be a
yeah.
egregore.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody believes in it. Easter Bunny, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing that was really important to understand about tulpas, the reason why they were so effective, and the reason this one guy wanted a tulpa, because that was what the thread was about that I was reading, where we really got into reading about tulpas. Specifically, the reason why the tulpa was so effective is not only was it you, so it loved you unconditionally, and by its very nature, you would love it. Because it was your subconscious, it would notice things that you didn't necessarily notice. The uncanny valley is an interesting effect that we have nowadays, where you see something that looks human, but it doesn't look quite human, and it gives you this ick, like you're like, I don't like that. Well, an effect of your subconscious mind noticing that there are some problems with whatever you're looking at. So like you look at it and it's like something's not right. That's an obvious example and a modern example. But maybe a not so obvious example would be if you went to a friend's house and you noticed lots of weird details about their house. Let's say it was a friend that you weren't familiar with. And then you kind of got this feeling like the hair was standing up on the back of your neck, and you said, I got to go. And you got out of there. And then you find out a month later, this guy that invited you over to his house was a serial killer. Um, we have this sense of perception that isn't necessarily forward in our minds. It's more of a subconscious perception of things that are off, or we can remember more details than we let ourselves know, but we can't process those details because it would drive us insane. Our conscious mind would have no idea how to process all this information. So effectively, the reason he had created the tulpa, and had been reported several times by other people, was that the tulpa was a helper that could help him observe things that he couldn't observe. So, for example, the tulpa would tell him, I think that person was lying to you. And then he was like, oh, why was the person lying to me? And then the subconscious would list the reasons that we all feel innately, but we don't necessarily feel like super strongly, or we choose to ignore about certain weird situations. So it feels like a type of meditation, a tulpa, but it feels like a really intrusive type of meditation that maybe doesn't have bettering you in mind, but rather it has I guess, the effect of making you more observant of your reality. But if you were schizophrenic and you had a tulpa, he would probably be, like telling you to stab people and stuff. So maybe if you think you
Maybe.
have some history of mental illness, don't make a tulpa.
Or here's an alternative to that.
Mm-hmm.
Might be able to tell you, like, hey, these guys are real. These over here are not real. So don't listen to them. That's just your
Yeah.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
These are real.
Yeah.
Those are. So I don't know. I don't have any experience with that at all, but it does make me think of intuition as well, because your intuition can tell you that kind of stuff too. But
I
it,
think that's what your intuition probably is, though. I think it's effectively your subconscious mind telling you things that you should pay attention to. As to
yeah,
whether or not you think of the subconscious mind as a conduit to the spiritual, that's totally up to you. But I can
there's
see
there's
your
many different lines of
case.
thought on that. So
Yeah.
so it could be your some people would see their intuition as their spirit guides, for example.
Mhm.
Could be your ancestors guiding you. It could be, I mean, well, we'll never know.
Yeah.
It's just whichever label you want to put on it, go right ahead. Nobody's going to stop you.
No, no, definitely not. I would never discourage anybody in whatever they believed in. I believe in ultimate freedom of autonomy, as long as it
Me
doesn't
too.
make you hateful or hurtful towards other people. Yeah, I'm a
And
big proponent of that. I definitely am. I hate hateful people. I hate people that are subjectively evil. And I do have my own opinion of what evil is. But beyond
it,
that, I really don't care what people do.
yeah, just don't be a dick. And
Yeah, that's
other
for
than that,
certain.
just be
I I think maybe that's the only reason that I had a really big rub with Christianity is I've seen a lot of people use it as a weapon as opposed to using it as a tool for peace. I don't like that at
absolutely.
all. But you could do that with anything, you could do that with race, you could do that with sexuality. It doesn't really matter. Hateful people are going to be hateful,
It's
regardless of the tool they use.
it's just like politics these days. That's religions, or those are religions today,
Yeah.
red or blue side, whatever. Everybody, like, it's horrible.
Well, yeah, I people do have a tendency to follow trends. I've noticed.
Hmm.
Um, when people don't have a strong opinion, they see enough of something on TV, and that's their opinion all of a sudden. I think Donald Trump is really prone to that. I'm going to get into real politics now. Donald Trump is the biggest fan of whoever's hand he just shook last. That is a weird phenomenon for me, but he's like, they're part of it, the outside group that he hates until he shakes their hand and makes a deal with them, and then they're suddenly part of his inside group. And that's actually surprisingly common amongst people. Because if you haven't, when people don't have a ton of empathy and they haven't personally met certain people, I think they have a tendency to just be like, I don't know who this person is. He hasn't been vetted or validated by me, so he's evil. And not maybe not even evil, but just like he's not part of my in group. I can't trust him or whatever.
Yeah,
And that's a pretty common. I think that's a religious thing as well as a political thing. I think that people don't trust people that are outside of the religious sphere. But you
absolutely.
might be surprised at how many really good allies you find that have almost like opposed ideologies to yourself because they're honorable people. They're really like, I mean, I've got Christian friends that I would trust with my life in a heartbeat, no doubt about it. But I'm not Christian. So what does that say about me? It says that I met these people on a personal level and found out that regardless of all the stuff they have in the background, they are really good people.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really important lesson for everybody to take from this terrible time we live in where divisiveness seems to be the thing that sells the most.
That's why I think it's important to limit the screen time and that kind of stuff, and just go be around people a little bit. And that's coming
I
from
definitely, yeah, I agree. I definitely think you should, if you do view media, view it with an extremely critical eye right
hmm
now. A lot of people aren't good critical thinkers, and I think that's a problem.
you don't even know what is a real human being that's making you
Mm-hmm.
mad or what is an AI bot anymore. And you don't know what news story is real. Like,
Mm-hmm.
turn it off, go outside.
Yeah, that helps so much. People that are oblivious to what's going on are often the happiest, and with good reason. Uh, if you do decide to go down that path, being critical of what you're seeing is really important. I would also say that if it sounds even remotely fantastical, automatically assume it's AI nowadays,
Hmm.
and assume that every news story you hear has an ulterior motive. I don't. Do you remember? I don't know if you ever saw the picture, but it was a picture that they had of this guy. He was a soldier, and he was giving water to this person. I can't remember if it was like an enemy combatant, or if it was a civilian from like the country he was in, or whatever. And they had two versions of the picture. They had one version where it just showed it showed the soldier holding the guy by his neck, didn't show the canteen of water, and it showed his gun, and it was all framed up to look like he was threatening with his
Oh my gosh.
gun.
Yeah, I didn't
And
see
then
that.
the other picture, it had the gun framed out, and it had the guy just pouring water in his mouth, right? So it looked like he was really virtuous. And then you zoomed out and you realized it was a soldier with a gun. He had it at his side, and he was feeding this guy water. So like both sides of the story were true, but they were framed so aggressively for a motive that you don't know the truth. And I think a lot of uh, a lot of news stories nowadays, maybe even political stories, have that element to them. You might be surprised at how often you read the truth from a neutral news source, and it doesn't sound like anything that you saw from like MSNBC or Fox News or whatever, or Facebook. Oh my goodness, Facebook's the worst about it.
One of my favorite books of all time, which I'll talk about a little bit on my channel, it's called Illusions: Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. It's a short book. I don't have it right here next to me. Otherwise, I would show it to you. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, there's so many passages that I like to quote. But there was one point where so the two characters, there's Donald Shimoda, who is this messiah who's quitting being a messiah, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's this other guy whose name is Richard Bach, who's actually the author of the book. He
Mm-hmm.
just keeps the same name in there. And
Yeah.
so Donald Shimoda asks Richard how many worlds he thinks there are. And Richard says, "Of course, there's only one world." He's like, seriously, he was about to take him out to lunch or to lunch and to watch a movie or something like that. He's like, "Oh, we're canceling this. I thought you were making so much progress, and then you ruined it right here." And
Mm-hmm.
he said, What do you mean?" He's like, "So you mean to tell me that you live in the same world as a stock market trader who is worried about the stock market crashing? You're telling me you live in that same world. You wake up and you're at fear for losing all your money because you're a trader on Wall Street and all this stuff." Says, "No, Richard, there's not one world. There is, at the time, it's an old book. So
Mm-hmm.
there are 4 billion worlds. So
Puts
it's
it in perspective. Yeah.
it's okay to, for one, social media really ruins that for us because now we're connected to every part of the world and we think the entire earth is our world, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an illusion. Our real world, and it's part of the idea of meditation when we quiet the mind down and we go outside and our mind is not talking to us. And even if something bad is going on in our life and we look around and we notice the green grass, maybe we see some flowers, maybe we remember we have people around us that care about us and that we care about them, stuff. It's all a perspective thing. So,
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. You have to have perspective. Like the book makes a really good point. Isn't there a meme like that now that's going around where it's like it's talking about the problem somebody's having and it zooms out and then it shows the earth and then it zooms out again and it shows the Milky Way galaxy and then it keeps zooming out and eventually shows the entire observable universe and it's like that's you and it's so infinitely small but your problem clearly can't be that important or whatever. uh, yeah.
yeah, I haven't seen that. But that's cool.
Yeah, it's a meme that they're using as a template for something like that. I can't remember, but at least it encapsulates the same idea as like realistically your perspective is very small. You're not the world. You're at best your town. maybe the state that you live in, maybe the country if you're really, really lucky. But most people don't even have that perspective, I don't think.
Yeah, most of the time we're just from a sanity standpoint,
Yeah.
we've got our own little bubble, we've got our own families to worry about and all that stuff. Everything else, if it doesn't really add to
Yeah.
your life, if you really can't do a whole lot about it,
Mhm.
it's getting on social media and arguing with people or arguing with robots about the topic and ruining your entire day, like that's not a part of your world. Your world
Arguing with
is
Russians, random Russian
yeah,
trolls.
or China, either
Yeah.
way.
I can't believe you voted for Donald Trump. That's what I need to hear. Yeah. Whatever. I get that. Oh, was that racist? I can't tell. Was that racist? Anyways.
Oh, speaking of that, so this is another thing I I wanted to talk about. So growing up, we grew up in a very, very small town with a very small mind. I don't know if it's that way anymore. You still live? Oh, you're down in the Hot Springs area.
Yeah, yeah. I got out of there a while ago. I mean, I probably moved away to Hot Springs when I was like 20 or 21. I can't remember, somewhere in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, most people like they're definitely a Christian area, heavily Christian area.
Hmm.
And I remember I just thought about this earlier. I remember getting off the bus one day and there was a wooden stake in the yard with a paper flyer on it trying to get people to join the KKK, which was I still think is crazy. Even back then I thought that was crazy
Yeah.
as a little kid, but
Oh, that
not
stuff is still prevalent today. Uh, I remember as a kid the KKK marching around Amity Town Square.
wow.
Yeah, that was a thing because there had been a black couple that had moved into town for some reason, and they wanted them gone, so they made a big statement about trying to get them out. And I know some of the people that were members of the KKK at the time. I'm not going to say any names. They were all older adults at the time, so they're very likely dead at this point. There might have been
Yeah.
some younger people as well. I don't know, because they're all wearing robes and stuff. But no, those places still exist even today. There, as a matter of fact, isn't there a whites only community that's been making the news lately to where they don't let people other than white people live there?
Yeah, it's in Arkansas somewhere. I watched a documentary on it because I was like, the thought of it kind of made me heated a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I don't have anything else to watch, so I'll watch this little documentary on it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember what the community is called, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I never really got into the specifics of it because I didn't need to get incensed either. I would have been a little bit upset with watching that. Not to the point where it would have ruined my day, but I would have been like, that's pretty despicable.
Hmm.
Uh, Making you can't make the assumptions based on race of a lack of inclusion of somebody in your community. Although I wouldn't really officially call this a community. I think it's just a few houses out in the middle of the woods,
Yeah,
from what
yeah,
I saw. But racism is alive and well, my friend, especially in the deep south. What's even weirder is you go a state over into the deep south, and Mississippi's like a huge majority black people. So like
hmm,
obviously the South has its fair share of like mixed races, but I don't understand. I get the hatred of it because it's a cultural thing. Like I don't say that I don't empathize with it, but I understand it. Like and comprehend how it happens.
that's
But
what I think it's one of those things too, where these ideas get passed down generation to generation, and a lot of people don't leave their town, and
mhm,
so they don't have any reason to know otherwise. And so while we have left there, and yeah, I never agree with that. Like my first best friend um, was African American when I was little, and so I never related to that.
mhm,
But bringing it back to the more spiritual side of things, which that certainly is, that's kind of the same thing with any religion. So any tradition you grew up in or around, you're going to have some of those beliefs are going to stick with you, and then you're going to pass those on, and they're going to, even if you're atheist or whatever, they're still going to be these hauntings around those types of beliefs that may affect you, and since we
mhm.
definitely grew up in a Christian heavily Christian area, like, why is it that you're an atheist today?
There was definitely some events that kind of pushed me in that direction, but I think one of the things that probably affected me the most was the fact that I had a very worldly view because of the internet. If I were to be completely honest, I was
Yeah.
super huge into computers and the internet, and when you're exposed to a bunch of different worldviews at a really young age, I think what most of what forms a person probably forms them before the age of 10, realistically. I think your teenage years are more like cementing those beliefs. And then, hopefully you've reevaluated what are incorrect beliefs in your 20s, and you've grown as a good person, from there on out. But uh, there was a defining moment. I had one defining moment. I was 5 years old, and for some reason, I'd gotten up out of bed on Christmas Eve, and I saw my mom putting presents under the tree. And I said, like, what is she doing? What's going on? And I walked in there and said, what are you doing, Mom? I remember this. This is strange, too, to have a memory that was really strong like this at 5 years old. She said, oh, I'm just helping Santa. I said, no, you're putting the presents under the tree. Is there no Santa Claus? That was what I asked her. And it took a while to finally get it out of my mom and dad, but they said, yeah, Santa Claus is not real. And I said, so the Easter Bunny's not real? And they said, no. And the Tooth Fairy? No. And I said, and God? And they're like, wait a minute, that's not the same thing. No, God's real. And it made me at least aware of the idea of questioning like presupposed beliefs from a really young age. But I would argue that my true like setting into atheism was probably seeing all of these different belief systems that were seemingly as valid as one another, and realizing that all the belief systems were so dead set and sure of themselves that it didn't make sense for one of them to be right over the other, but rather maybe they are all, I don't know, maybe a product of their culture, or they're all wrong. And wrong is the bad way to say it. I don't think of them as like you have a belief system and it's wrong because uh, the idea of a reality beyond ours in terms of heaven and hell and a spiritual realm and of a creator, that's wrong. I don't think of it that way. But to be able to nail down the specifics of what God is, to be able to nail down the specifics of what sin is, because every Abrahamic religion, especially, has the concept of sin, and I think every religion has a concept of right or wrong.
It's the mark.
So it just made more sense to say, at the very least, everybody is really not 100% aware in any concrete way what is happening. And that's why I call it weak atheism, because I can't say with 100% certainty that God doesn't exist, or gods, or higher beings.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be eventually a scientific explanation if we ever acquire enough information to say that, yes, the universe was created. But there's no concrete evidence of that. It's a well above and beyond our understanding of reality currently.
And what we can understand, I think.
Yeah, we're very limited. We're what are we, like, maybe 200,000 years removed from being animals, effectively, for climbing around in jungles and trying to figure out how to poke something with a stick. I mean, we're very young in terms of our intellect. The fact that we're as intelligent as we are is amazing to me. But I don't think we'll know the truth about a lot of the stuff, and I mean concrete evidence of the truth, for another 50,000 years, maybe. I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll need to be able to transcend what we're seeing physically, and we'll definitely need to be able to transcend our basic needs before we can get even remotely close to that, and to dedicate the resources necessary to understand it.
And I think that I completely agree. I think that the divine in general, but we'll just say God, the ultimate God, or whatever God your religion worships, or whatever everybody tries to put God in a box and give him a human suit. Because I mean, again, it does say God made man in his image, so we automatically assume, oh, God's a human. God's not a human. I was told this when I took a religion class when I first went back to school after I left the Air Force. And my religion 101 teacher, he was a retired colonel in the Army. He was a chaplain. And that was one of the first things he said. He said, taught us the word anthropomorphization or whatever.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
you,
making something human that isn't effectively.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier for us to comprehend something that we can't comprehend by
Mhm.
putting it within a box. And
Yeah.
in some ways that's helpful, but in other ways we use it, and religions especially use it to tear down other people because we're like, yeah, God is like us and screw you, you're wrong, you're going to hell, you're a devil
Yeah.
worshiper and all this stuff. And
Mhm.
that's not right. And the way I view things, I mean, God is just a label. It could be, there's so many different gods and goddesses
Mhm.
and enlightened beings. So the Buddha, stuff like that. These are all, and we don't even know what those are. A lot of these, so Jesus, assuming he walked the earth, did come into existence, into this reality in human form. But all of these other things, like the Greek gods and goddesses, the Mesopotamian, Sumerian, you name it,
Mhm.
was it Norse, all that stuff, we don't really know what all that stuff is. They have some really cool stories to go with them, but we don't really know what they are.
Mhm.
We anthropomorphize them, and maybe they gave us that to help us better understand them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really want to look into that more, as I've been exploring the pagan stuff a
Yeah.
lot more in the past year or so. But my view on the entire thing, and you can call God whatever you want to call him. You can call him the universe. You can call him consciousness. You can call him whatever. My view of it, if you think about this, well, I see God as consciousness, literally just consciousness in general. And it's kind of this blanket layer that covers all of existence and that connects each and every thing that's within it. And
Mhm.
if you raise that in this little blanket fort thing that I'm in, I have this roof on top of it, okay? And so I think about that layer being raised up. So the roof up above my head right here, that would be God the Father, like Jesus was talking about. Not talking about the God of the Old Testament. I don't agree that that's the same God. I think those were like the 12 different gods of that the each of the 12 tribes of Israel worship,
Mhm.
like Baal and
Yeah.
uh, Ashtaroth and whoever else.
Mhm.
The the God the Father, would be up above, and that's something that nobody can really comprehend. I mean, Jesus spoke of him as being the Father, and then all these gods and goddesses from all these different traditions are these lower level things that are down below, that are like doorways to the Father. They're like things that we can fixate on that can help us reach whatever you want to call the Father, the universe, whatever label you want to give it, because
Mhm.
no label, can comprehend it, because we can't comprehend it, but we can focus on some kind of a deity or some kind of enlightened being that can help us, give us a slight clue as to what direction to go to try to get to whatever that is.
Mhm.
You know, that's what I think of what God is. Like I don't know what God is, but I felt his presence in
Yeah.
meditation. And it's
Mhm.
pretty easy to feel his presence. It's like that initial presence, from what I learned from Paramahansa Yogananda, was doing the self-realization fellowship stuff, was that initial presence of God is just that kind of blanket of peace that falls
Mhm.
over you, where there's
Mhm.
no thought, like you're just absolute stillness. And so that's another thing. One of my problems with Christianity, and anytime it says God, was regretting that he made these heathens and they were being all ridiculous down there, and so he started destroying them and all this stuff. I'm like, that is not the God I know. I have my own relationship with God, and that nothing in the Old Testament is
Mhm.
anything like that God. That God is conditional. The one I know is unconditional. He lets people make mistakes and all that stuff, and it's part of the free will. That's the true free will. There's none of this. I'm going to give you free will, but if you don't do it like I want you to, I'm going to send you to hell for eternity. I'm going to torture you for eternity. And that's free will, That's
Yeah, free
no,
will consequences. Yeah.
that's not free will.
Mhm.
Get the frick out of here with that. That's not free will. That's uh,
Oh,
but
that it brings up an interesting question. Uh, Obviously, you have this opinion of what God is. What do you think is the purpose of human existence? Why do you think we exist?
for the fun of it. And it's not always fun. It's a fun in quotation marks for us
Mhm.
that have to experience it.
Yeah.
But I think that God wanted to experience, this is just my current idea, that God wanted to experience every possible possibility conceivable. And, all we can see is what's here on earth. But in reality, there could be, and, infinite dimensions, infinite earth style place, infinite different types of creatures, and this one universe is huge,
Mm-hmm.
on its own. But I think the one became two for the fun of becoming two in order to become one again. So the one split itself into infinite little sparks, divine sparks. So that's the images that came out and came into or became life into every living thing. Not even just every living thing, but even, from the animist perspective, the
Yeah.
animist thinks that there's consciousness maybe in everything, maybe not a soul, but consciousness
Mm-hmm.
as part of everything. So like this house that I'm in, there's a consciousness to this house, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe to this monster can. I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I think that God, just for the fun of it,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's that part of us that is divine, that's directly connected to God, is actually a little piece of God. Man, ultimately, I think that's what religion ended up trying to take away from us, because
Mm-hmm.
if we knew our true power, if we knew who we truly are, I'm not saying we are God. I'm saying we're a little piece of him.
Yeah. And we aren't God, but we are of God. I
Yeah,
get that concept. Uh, yeah, I could understand that. Actually is in line with some of the ideas of God being omnipotent and omniscient, um,
and omnipresent, and
omnipresent, and everything else. The only way that an entity could be omnipresent is if it was everything. So
yeah,
that actually falls in line with some of the concepts of God. I have two concepts of God, if you would like to hear them.
absolutely.
If I had to define God, if you made me define it, I've heard two really good definitions that are just vague enough that they actually make sense. I can't remember his name, but it was the road manager for ACDC at a certain time. He became really religious and he had an amazing quote. And I think Pete Holmes was talking about the quote in one of his comedy specials. He said, God is the name of the blanket that we throw over the mystery to give it shape, which is just a beautiful way to put it. Like the idea of like there's a ghost and you throw a sheet over it, now you
Yeah,
can see what the ghost actually is. And that was a beautiful way to explain it. My personal favorite, however, and the one that resonates the most with me probably, is God is the author and we are the book. Which
I can
is,
see that.
there's a lot of implications that surround that, because obviously you can't define God in book terms because God doesn't exist in book terms. And it would explain a lot of the attributes that God has, like the ability to see the past and the future, and the ability to change the story at will. Because all he has to do is erase the words and refill in with new words. He changes the story as he sees fit. But that also implies that God is perhaps he's invested in the book, but he is perhaps apathetic about the feelings of the people in the book, their desires, which would go more along the lines of seeing God as the owner of an ant farm, that kind of philosophy. And those are the only ways that I can really rectify God as a being that has created the universe and that has like set us in motion. Because, it would indicate that humans, I should say fossil records and paleontology would indicate that humans haven't always been. So maybe we wouldn't have been the purpose for the universe to have been created, but rather the universe has been created just to exist and to grow as it does, and then maybe along the way, intelligent life happens to occur. Yeah. If you're like really biblical, I guess you could say that the Earth is 6,000 years old, but I don't believe
Yeah, I
that
don't
for a
believe
minute.
that.
But it's interesting to ponder what God is. But I think you could philosophize for 10,000 years and probably only begin to crack the code of what God could possibly be,
Hmm.
because it's so open ended. It's so hard to answer.
That I think that's the best way to do it, because anytime you try to define what God is, if you make it absolute, there is no absolutes to it. Like you've committed a fallacy, I guess. And I think that's kind of the fun of it, is just kind of pondering it. That's one of the things that I enjoy. And I kind of reevaluate it every so many years as I learn and grow and all that stuff. And what do I think of what God is? I think kind of like what you were just talking about. I think that God is a very distant type of phenomena, if you will.
Mhm.
One that maybe got everything started, got the ball rolling, but once it did, he or it, whatever you want to call it, he just let it be. So that's where I think the unconditional love comes from, is that I believe that it or whatever loves his creation enough to let it exist without interfering in it. And so it is kind of an experiment, and we get to be the little mini gods. We come here and we're like, man, this place sucks. And now, yeah, we have a lot of, and some people have a lot more heartache than others. And, okay, if reincarnation is real, then that means that we get many lifetimes to try to improve. And just thinking about that right now, just there's so many questions. Like, I don't even know where to
Yeah.
begin. I just added some more questions just then. I'm like,
Yeah. It's an infinite amount of questions that you truly can't grasp or answer in one Zoom call, I guess, for certain.
there was another idea I had not too long ago that I was like, because there was a passage, I want to say it was in, maybe it was in a couple of them, but Matthew, it was Jesus talking to the Pharisees, and he was talking about, when I was sick and in prison, you didn't come visit me. When I was hungry, you did not feed me. When I was naked, you did not clothe me, and all that stuff. And they're like, when did we never do these things for you? And he said that when you have done this to the least of, or not done this to the least of these people or whatever, you have done this to me. And that
Mhm.
really got me thinking about how, so going back to the Christ consciousness, and then so that individual spark that we all have that connects us to the infinite.
Mhm.
Looking at that, I came up with this idea of, what if, so that's the part that connects us all. What if, and say if reincarnation was real, what if, and if we look at any person, that they're all us, cut through, like we're all individual humans, but there's a part of us inside of us that is the same.
Mhm.
Okay, so if we treat somebody bad, you're just treating yourself bad. What if all of our reincarnations are being experienced simultaneously? Make your brain hurt a little bit
A
thinking
little
about that.
bit, yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, that implies that we're perhaps a colony or something like that. Like in a spiritual sense. But there's a lot of philosophies that say that even without saying that. Like uh, I know Stoicism. Stoicism talks about that specifically. It talks
Interesting.
about how the way you handle yourself and the way you handle others is for the betterment of humanity. It specifically talks about that in some of the books, and I think a lot of religious philosophies have that idea as well. They're talking about service before self often.
Mhm.
That's a really common concept also in public servitude, like government.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's not a foreign concept. And I think you'll find that's pretty common thread amongst a lot of religions and a lot of philosophies.
Yeah, my Air Force the three core values are integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do.
Mhm.
So
It's a very common thread. It's renowned for a reason. Teamwork is a big deal. Obviously, teamwork in let's say sports, for instance, is a really big deal. They teach you that as a value in high school football. And they do it for a very specific reason. And there's two reasons, in my opinion. Number one, they want you to serve the greater good. They want to instill that virtue in you. But I think also as well, it's important that most people's ego be tempered really early on, because not all of us are going to be what you would call superstars. And I mean that in every sense of the word. We're not, if you take it in a religious sense, not all of us are going to be apostles, not all of us are going to be Christ. That ideology of you're going to be a normal person living a normal life, but you still have an obligation to at least put somebody in front of yourself, whether it be your children, whether it be a person that's hungry on the street or whatever. But the ego thing is really important, and that's something I've had to deal with a lot in life. When you play a lot of video games, you get that video game character complex, the protagonist complex. Sometimes that needs to be knocked down a peg so you realize that you're a very small piece of a very large puzzle.
that's where I think, well, and like you're talking about with stoicism. So do you do a daily, do you journal daily as well?
I try to write down at least weekly, maybe not daily,
Okay.
but I do weekly. I have a bunch of, at this point, it's got to be a couple hundred documents on my computer. And I was doing this before Stoicism, even. I was just writing about my life and about,
That's awesome.
goal setting and like, how I've handled certain things. And it's helped me a lot, man. It really has changed the way that I approach reality. I treat people, not that I ever treated people bad, but I go out of my way to treat people better than I used to. I went from being apathetic to empathetic, especially as I've aged. And I've definitely, although I think over the past year, maybe I've slipped a little bit, I definitely was way more devoted to prioritization of time, which is a really big thing in Stoicism. Understanding that wasting time is just like a cardinal sin as far as like achieving goals in life, number one, and number two, trying to live life virtuously, which is just treating people fairly and not being gluttonous, things of that nature.
But
Uh,
I think that, so a caveat to the service before self,
mhm,
which obviously is important to serve others, but I don't think it's the best way, because if we're falling apart ourselves, sometimes
mhm,
helping others can help us help ourselves. But so you're on a plane, for example,
mhm.
an emergency is about to happen. What do they tell you about the oxygen mask? What do they tell you to do? Put yours
You have
on
to turn on.
first
Uh-huh.
before you help others.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about that. And like you're talking about with the journaling and
Mhm.
introspection and self-reflection on how you've been, that's part of that. Well, if you're falling apart, eventually trying to help others is not going to end up helping others. So we got to take care of ourselves. And that's a big thing with like mental health, for example.
Yeah.
Like it's very important to take time and take a break from helping others if we're,
Mhm.
again, falling apart. So putting on our mask first, then serving others.
Yeah. There's stuff, yeah, you have to do that. I agree. If you go by that tenet that you always give half of your food to somebody else, well, half of zero is zero. You still have to
Hmm.
have food in the very first instance. And that I agree with that until it becomes excessive and like until like you are, if you haven't developed good enough coping mechanisms to deal with your shortcomings,
Hmm.
uh, that is a bit of a personal flaw. And I don't know, you might have to seek professional help in that regard, like whether it be a financial advisor, whether it be a therapist or whatever. But I do agree entirely that in order to help people, you have to be in good enough shape to help people. Like you can't give somebody a piggyback ride if you can't squat 20 pounds.
Yeah.
You gotta service yourself enough so you're serviceable to society. Like you have the capacity to help society. And it's hard not to get lost in that as well, though, where you are like selfish with your time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you could, I guess, the best balance I've seen, and I try to follow it, is to be opportunistically kind. when the opportunity arises, be kind. Maybe don't go out of your way to do it. I mean, I don't have the resources personally to feed every person that's homeless on the streets, but if I'm going into McDonald's and there's a buy two burgers for $5 deal and there's a homeless guy on the sidewalk, I've done that several times, just because I had $20. $5 wasn't all of my money. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. That's a good philosophy to have, and I think I practice it. I have an example of that actually. I was playing disc golf. What was it, 2 days ago maybe? And I played it at a Baptist church near my house because they have a little 9-hole course. And I'd been throwing disc and practicing my drives over and over. You do it like you're doing at the range with golf balls or whatever. If you've ever played
Mhm.
regular golf, it's the same concept. And I saw this van pull in to the parking lot. And I saw the woman get out, and she walked over and she looked at her tire, and then she wandered back around. She started pulling all like the jack out and the spare and everything else. And I saw her go into town changing her tire. And I was thinking, should I help her? Well, kind of looks like she's got it, so I'm going to let her handle it. And then I saw her leave the donut on the ground, walk around, get her phone, and start calling somebody. And I said, oh, she actually does need help. It's kind of weird to think that way. Should I have charged immediately and helped her change the tire? Well, I could have, I guess. But I thought, well, if she's got it, by the time I get down there, she'll have it 3/4 of the way changed. I don't really need to help her. She can help herself. But then when she couldn't help herself, that's when you had to step in.
Mhm.
But that judgment, I guess, the ability to judge when somebody really needs help, I guess that's something you have to focus on, is deciding when you need to step in. Uh,
Yeah.
because sometimes people don't want you to step in. They're too proud. They need to do something on their
Yeah.
own to develop their own character. It's a hard judgment to make, but I am definitely opportunistic in that I will help people when the opportunity arises. I
That's
think
awesome.
it's probably important to serve. If you can serve your community, serve it in a way that at least isn't like you charging in and taking the tire tool out of their hand. They're like, I totally had that. And I'm like, no, sir, I must change this for you. And then they're looking at you like, he's kind of a douche, isn't he?
That's another. So playing with the ego is a little. It's a fine line. You can go. You,
Mm-hmm.
the ego can get you from many different ways, even when you're trying to help people. So
Exactly.
that's like I guess it's another Jesus saying is don't let
Mm-hmm.
the left hand know what the right hand is doing, or vice versa, something
Yeah.
like that. You're not like you go
Mm-hmm.
out and like you see the Pharisees praying. Don't be like them out there praying in the streets, making it look like they're all holy and all this stuff, but go into your closet to pray. Be in private. In secret, because what is
Mm-hmm.
done in secret is rewarded
Yeah. Yeah.
openly or whatever.
Yeah. Discretion is the better part of valor. That's the modern equivalent of that concept, I think.
And then the other sense of helping others, but also focusing on yourself is so okay when it comes to like social media where we can't do shit about most of this. I mean, assuming any of it is actually real in the first place, but any of the stuff that we see, unless we really can, like we need to reflect on this, can we really do something about this? Or are we just going to get in an argument with somebody and it's just going to ruin our day? And
Mhm.
we didn't make it anything better or worse. We just made it worse for ourselves. So, in that sense, if you want to make a change in the world, the better thing to do is to turn it off, whatever social media thing it is, and work on yourself. Fix those things in yourself that you're
Mhm.
accusing other people of doing.
Yeah.
So take a look at yourself and what are you lacking in? Because whatever you fix in yourself, you also fix in the universe. Because so this
Mhm.
is kind of a hermetic occult type principle, which is as above, so below, as
Mhm.
within, so without. So whatever you change on the inside, you're actively changing outwardly. So
Yeah.
the microcosm within you becomes the macrocosm,
Mhm.
and if once eventually we all end up raising our consciousness levels up enough, then we're all doing this and we're all
Yeah.
really affecting the universe in that way.
Yeah, it has practical applications as well. So, like, even if you weren't necessarily thinking of it that way, like
Mhm.
spiritually, it definitely has practical applications.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've had to observe myself, and then I end up being a better person for it. So it's definitely necessary.
It's not easy at all. It's
No, not at all.
like, yeah, self-reflection is not it's not fun. Shadow work,
Mhm.
the journaling like you're doing with the stoicism, all that stuff. It's not easy putting yourself literally the only thing I can think of right now is putting yourself on trial. For in your case, you do it once a week. My methodology has been a little bit different.
Mhm.
Um, but you're putting yourself on trial and figuring out what you could have done better.
Mhm.
That in this confrontation or whatever, I could have. I mean, I know I did this with my wife and with my kids. So uh,
Yeah.
this weekend, like toddler girl, just man, just testing you over and over and over again, and it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so hard to find the patience, to get through that, and you gotta reflect on it. So okay, you know, several months ago, I had way less patience than I do now, but it's because okay, and sometimes I'm more conscious too. So some weekends, like I just struggle. It's the whole thing is a struggle. But then, like this weekend, it was maybe I get frustrated for a moment, but then I'm like, okay, I'm getting too frustrated, so I need to. It's okay. She's a toddler, that kind of thing, and you can kind of
Uh-huh.
self reflect as you go. But other
Mhm.
times, it's past the weekend or whatever, and then you reflect on the past and like, okay, next week I'm gonna try to do things a little better, and you just
Yeah.
go from there. So I think there's something to be said about putting things on paper or in your computer or whatever,
Mhm.
because now you can see things for what it is. But otherwise, you can, if you're a little bit aware, if you have a little bit of that built up within you, you can go through a situation and then right after that, you can be like, oh, okay, I didn't act the way I wanted to. So I'm going to make a note of this mentally. You can do
Mhm.
it that route.
Yeah. There's actually a pretty interesting Stoic bit on that. I'll kind of talk about it a little bit. It might help change your perception of it, which sometimes you have to react in the moments. This maybe doesn't always work, but it
Yeah,
is a coping
absolutely.
mechanism. This coping mechanism is basically you have your impression, then you have your analysis, and then you have your judgment. It's a three-part process that they tell you to use in order to address situations. Your impression is the first impression of something you can't control it. So it could be something that just you see something, you see a homeless person on the side of the road, and your first impression is, oh, maybe he has a hard time holding a job. Maybe he's not a hard worker. I don't know exactly. But then what you get to do is you get to take that impression, you get to analyze it. So you analyze the situation at this point, and then you look at him and you say, oh, well, maybe the guy can't get a job because he's disabled. It looks like he's missing a hand and a leg, so it's extremely difficult for him to hold a job. And then the judgment would be the final part of it, is where you've taken your analysis and you passed a judgment on this situation or person or whatever, and then you've made a hopefully an educated decision on what this person is and what he's about. And it's a pretty important process, but we can't always exercise that process,
Mhm.
unfortunately. That might be something that helps you with something like that.
Absolutely.
The other process is it's part of the meditative process, and let me remember it exactly as I can so I don't mess it up. Uh, I want to say that they talk about what is it? It's a dichotomy of control. I want to say is what the concept is called. The dichotomy of control deals with the idea that you can't control external circumstances. You can only control how you react to those circumstances. So the general idea is that the things that you can control is the way you think, the way you feel, all these internal emotions that you have. You can't control things like the weather. You can't control the way other people act, etc. You can influence them, but you can't control them directly.
Mm.
So really, I guess the whole idea is, and you're probably doing this subconsciously and you don't realize it over time, but probably what's happening as you learn what is important and what is not important, what to worry about and what not to worry about with your daughter, you
Mhm.
will eventually lessen your emotional reaction to what she's doing. You'll understand what's important to worry about. It's okay if she's on the floor playing with toys loudly. It's not okay if she's running up to the stove and trying to grab a hot burner.
Yeah.
Like your emotional response will change, and it would even change if you had multiple kids. First kid, you'd be like helicopter parent. Third
Mhm.
kid, they're launching themselves off the roofs, and you're like, as long as you're wearing a helmet and you're jumping on a mattress, you're good to go. So experience is going to help,
Yeah, absolutely.
but definitely analysis and the dichotomy of control might be really beneficial in your instance.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, we've got to react. I think that's a part of the whole learning process in general, even if we're not actively trying to learn something. Like,
Mhm.
okay, the first time when we're like 18 years old or something, or even younger, maybe a little older, may react really wildly, and then the results are terrible,
Mhm.
say something wrong. Now this dude kicks our ass or something,
Mhm.
like, okay,
Yeah.
need to chill it out a little bit. So the next time you're in that situation, maybe, and we may have to go through it. I mean, I'm very hard headed. It takes me, I love for some reason to learn the hard way, you know,
Yeah.
but eventually something sticks,
Hmm.
but it's definitely a lot better going or being a little bit more conscious about our actions and
Yeah. Not assuming the worst, especially what other people say to you and what they do to you. You
and
can analyze the situation. It helps a bunch, man. I tell you.
and some days we have off days, and some days we're just like, man, do not mess with me. And then then somebody messes with you, and then you just lose it. And you're like, man, I know better than that.
Yeah.
But it's just part of life.
Yeah. You're not going to have good days. I often use disc golf as a metaphor for how to deal with life. Yeah, I told you I played disc golf. You ever
Yeah,
played disc golf before?
I haven't.
Okay, it's just like regular golf, but with disc. Um, you don't call them frisbees because frisbees is technically a brand name. If you ever look
Oh,
on a
okay.
frisbee toy, you'll say frisbee flying disc toy is what it'll say.
Huh.
So disc are the technical term for all of these different, like disc you throw at baskets, and the baskets are just these big chain baskets. They'll have a basket on the bottom. They'll have chains all hanging from the top, and then you throw
Yeah.
it into there, and it absorbs the kinetic impact of the disc, and it falls into the basket. Same exact rules as golf, but the courses can be a lot different because you can achieve different flight paths with a disc. They'll go left, they'll go right, they'll do S turns, depending on
Yeah.
like the shape of the disc or whatever. But I actually use Stoicism to deal with a lot of the lessons and hardships that you face on the course as well.
Oh,
The way it pertains to having a good day versus a bad day, you have good days and bad days on the course. Everybody can relate to this in golf. There's going to
yeah.
be one day where your drives are just stellar. They're going right down the middle of the fairway. They're landing exactly where you want them. You're getting up and down. You're getting your pars and your birdies. You're feeling like fantastic, stellar. And then there are other days where you've hit every tree that has ever existed on the side of the fairway. You're just ricocheting off, left, right, center. You don't even know where it's at, man. You're 20 minutes digging around, looking for stuff, and you can't find where your disc or your ball's at or whatever. And it's the same exact metaphor for having a bad day in the middle of life. Whenever I am having a bad day on the course, what I do at that point is I try to mitigate the damage as much as possible, stop the bleeding, basically. And stopping the bleeding can be as simple as being really, really conservative about what I do.
Mhm.
So instead of going for a birdie, I go for a par. Instead of going for a par, I go for a bogey because I don't trust my ability to handle the course well. Maybe I feel like it's kind of a tight gap between these two trees. Maybe I want to just lay it up. That way I can, get through cleanly with two shots as opposed to risking 4 or 5 by ricocheting off this tree. The same exact things apply to life for me. If I'm having a particularly bad day and I know that I've got a short temper, I distance myself from people.
Mhm.
I put myself in less stressful situations. maybe that cigar that I like to smoke once every 3 months, maybe today's the day that I go smoke that cigar, that kind of stuff. And I do like seeing metaphors from one area of my life and applying them to other areas. I think that it might help people when you're having a bad day to realize I can't afford to add on to the level of stress that I'm already feeling. So maybe that's when you eat that half a pint of ice cream. Maybe
Yeah,
that's when you grab that extra candy bar at lunch. Maybe that's when you tell Karen, you're a nice person. I have things to do, and you just back away from her. So if that helps at all, and you're having a bad day, remember your actions can very well lead it from being just an absolutely terrible day to just a so-so day.
yeah,
Stop the bleeding, as it were.
yeah. If you can stop the bleeding, like, well, like you said, don't if you are able to not make it any worse, you stop the
Mm-hmm.
bleeding, you cool off a little bit, then
Mm-hmm.
the day has the ability to come back to neutral, which
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the majority of our lives, I think, are neutral. They're if we put if we can attach good or bad
Mm-hmm.
to any moment, but the majority of the time it's just neutral. There's life is just happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a few good moments and we have a few bad moments. And if we stop the bleeding, like you said, then we have the opportunity to cool off and then
Yeah.
return back to our center point of balance.
Mm-hmm. It's often way better to be balanced than it is to be at one extreme or the other. I've
Yeah,
noticed that as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, I use this as a general life goal. I don't try to always be happy. I try to be content. And I think that's a really good goal for a lot of people to achieve, is just to be content with what you're doing.
My idea on that is joy. So happiness is just a momentary thing, something that's fleeting, but joy is something like an overall thing. So even if you
Mhm.
have a bad day, you can still have joy.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
like
there,
that especially. Yeah, I tend to avoid the stronger emotions just because maybe I've set myself up for that in life. But contentedness seems to be the one emotion that can keep me going in the face of adversity. Like I'm content with what I've done. I'm content with how I've handled
mm,
myself. I think life contentment is probably the best most people are going to get. The joy is sometimes hard to find. It really is.
it was another book I read. It was the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. I haven't read it in a long time, but I'm pretty sure that's what they were talking about too. It
Yeah.
was I don't know. I don't want to go too deep on that, but joy can be to me. It's even at a minimum just slightly into the positive
Mm-hmm.
as an overall thing. That's
Yeah.
that's my take on it. It doesn't have
Amen.
to be all the way like because again, man, I view life as like this kind of rubber band thing that when we go one way or another, good or bad, the opposite force begins pulling on us. So when we're ecstatic, we're so excited,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, we're 100 feet up in the air. Then all of a sudden, the ladder, whatever it was that we're
Yeah.
standing on, gets pulled out from under us. And then we just crash and
Mm-hmm.
burn really hard because there's that opposite
Yeah.
force. And so, the best place to be, I mean, I guess the best place to be would be remain as unattached as possible, which is very difficult. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier said than done, but things like meditation that helps out a lot with that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can experience the highs and lows, and they hurt or they feel really good, but you're content with going back down to a
Yeah.
neutral point.
Yeah. You've definitely got to be content. You can't be like constantly disappointed.
Mm,
But then your mindset could be a big part of that. It's a real phenomenon, though. It's
mhm.
observed actually. Have you ever heard of post concert blues? Is that a thing you've ever heard of?
It seems familiar, but no, I don't think that specific term.
It's a big deal. It's a studied phenomenon. After you go to a really like life-changing concert with your favorite band, you're just absolutely ecstatic through the roof. A lot of people will tend to get depressed in the days following because they know that that's like the best they're going to get. They've
Mhm.
seen the best thing, so they'll have a moment of depression that troughs down for 2 or 3 days, maybe even a week after that, and then they'll return to relative normal. It's the same way with going on vacations. You usually have a week of post vacation blues when you go back to work. That's a surprisingly common phenomenon when you experience extreme highs and then you go back to relative, normality in
Yeah,
life. So
I can see that.
it's not at this point, I wouldn't even call it spiritual as much as I just call it a common human experience that everybody has. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe it has a basis in spirituality, but like at least there's data that represents it, and I really appreciate the data. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely well. I think anything can be spiritual because I think ultimately that's what we truly are, a spirit or a
Mhm.
spirit, and
Yeah.
we're spirits having a human experience.
Hmm.
So we get to experience these crazy emotions and stuff, and we make the mistake of getting attached to it, and then we crash and burn and all this stuff, and
Hmm.
but then as we grow, we get better with all that stuff. And
Okay, I've got a good question for you. We're
okay,
talking about the spirit and how it exists. Do you think that animals have spirits?
yeah, definitely.
So, do you think that the spirit is attracted or attached to any particular trait in animals, or do you think all animals, regardless of what they are spiritual?
I would say, like, so something that fascinates me. Look at dogs specifically.
Hmm.
Different breeds of dogs. Yeah, I'm sure this is like with any animal. Maybe it's even with humans. It's just harder to see because we're too close to that. But dogs, especially because I have dogs. I love dogs. Like depending on the breed, like there's this like programming that these different breeds have. So like blue heelers and any type of cattle dogs and that kind of stuff, herder dogs, like they all act a certain way. So I don't know if that that part of them kind of seems robotic to me, but ultimately I think everything, and maybe that makes me more animist in my beliefs, but I think everything has spirit. Everything has some kind of a soul or whatever,
Hmm.
something that makes them an individual. Maybe they're not quite as conscious as we are about things,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're lower than us,
Hmm.
but that they're maybe just less. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't been able to communicate with animals yet, so I
Yeah.
don't really know what they're thinking. I know they like food,
Yeah, highly food motivated most of the time.
toys, and yeah.
Yeah, their basic needs are definitely very high on their list of priorities. Um,
But they definitely experience, like dogs, for example, definitely experience love. I think you know for their owners. Yeah, there's something to be said about that. I think.
yeah, I have high opinions of animals, of certain types of animals, especially. The ones that fascinate me the most might possibly be like corvids. I think they're just amazing, especially compared to humans.
What is
Highly
that?
Corvids are like crows and ravens and
Oh, okay,
magpies.
okay.
They're just the types of birds, but they're specifically the ones that we know of as really super intelligent and super social, and they tend to integrate well into human society. Um, Crows are way more social amongst themselves than with people. Ravens are a little social between themselves. They have to be to a certain extent, but they really like to attach themselves to a particular human, it seems. Magpies are highly social to humans, especially. They're very bold, but I don't know that they're necessarily as smart as crows are. But crows are really strange because they exhibit a lot of characteristics that could almost be argued to be like mammalian in nature. They're very
Mhm.
affectionate towards their young and one another, and they can communicate extremely complex details with one another in ways that we can't understand necessarily. Like the ability to identify whether a person is good or bad and relay that on to the next generation of children that they have. There's no way they could do that unless they could describe the features of what a person looks like.
Yeah.
So they're obviously highly intelligent. Whales, a lot of cetaceans, that includes dolphins as well, are highly intelligent. They're super social. They might be as intelligent or more so than us in a lot of ways. It's hard to analyze their intelligence. Obviously, we have primates, like chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans. We have lesser primates as well, which are like gibbons, and there might be some others as well that are lesser primates that are they're still similar to us, but they're not necessarily as much like us as orangutans or whatever. And what else would be highly intelligent? Wolves. Wolves are extremely intelligent. That's why we have dogs. It just made sense to take a really intelligent pack animal that could take, like lead from us and then have them be our best friend, so to speak.
Protectors and everything else.
Yeah. What else is extremely intelligent and kind of displays the same? Did I say elephants? I don't know if I said elephants or not.
No, I
Um,
don't think so.
Elephants are just ridiculously intelligent, have extremely high social IQ, are tool users, and they never forget. They have just excellent memories, and they can be vindictive towards humans as well.
Yeah.
Uh, I've watched them launch people like they were toys, and I was like, "What the heck?" I don't want
Jeez.
to be that guy. But they're also extremely kind as well. It just depends on the personality of the animal, I think. But I guess those are the animals that you could argue that could have at least some sort of spiritual awareness, even if they can't define it necessarily as such. Octopuses as well are
Oh
extremely
yeah.
intelligent, but they're weird in that they have such short lifespans that it's hard for them to gain a culture. They don't have any culture necessarily. So I don't know. Those are, if you were going to vote for an animal to have the spirit and that was discernible and similar to human spirits, I would argue that those are all the animals you would look at first.
Yeah. It'd be fascinating to be able to communicate even like telepathically. So there
Mm-hmm.
there's a book. I have it on audiobook, but it was in my original meditation tapes
Mm-hmm.
that was recommended. Let me find it real quick since we're talking about this.
Yeah.
I have it in my Audible stuff. But it's very interesting. It's one of the dogs in there was a very famous dog from TV. It was like a German Shepherd.
Oh my gosh, there's probably a million of them at this point.
Yeah, but it was old times.
Mm-hmm. Might have been
Kinship
an old version of Rin Tin Tin, maybe. I don't know.
is kinship with all life is.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, it was very interesting. It's about like wish it would pull up the
Oh,
not
I
trying to
heard it.
play it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting listen or read on animal communication and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
that that German Shepherd was one of the animals, and there's several different examples in there. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, don't underestimate the intelligence of animals, and it'd be awesome to be able to communicate and see exactly like what else do you think about, outside of the normal things that we expect them to think about.
Yeah. I don't know that dogs would be highly philosophical. I feel like crows might. I'm going to make a point here. It's going to sound racist at first, but it's not racist. You want to know what's really weird and that I never knew? Uh, there's a black Santa Claus.
Really?
Yeah, apparently that's a really common thing. Like black households have black Santa Claus. And I was sitting there thinking, well, okay, it makes sense. You'd want a Santa Claus that presents as closer to you.
Yeah.
There's, I'm, if there was a Christmas in the Middle East, there would probably be an Arabic Santa Claus. Let's be honest here. But
Yeah.
it makes me wonder if you asked a crow what his idea of God was, and it was crow God. It was a big crow that
I
was,
I can see that.
yeah, and it calls into question the idea of God being, like this guy floating in the clouds with a big white beard and stuff like that. Makes you rethink that idea.
That makes me
But,
think of another book that I love. It's also by Richard Bach, the one who did
mm,
the Illusions book. It's called
uh-huh.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Oh,
and it's a very good book, very short book,
uh-huh.
and the characters are all seagulls. So it's a whole seagull flock. And this
Mhm.
one seagull is tired of doing the same thing every day. Just, you know, eat, reproduce, die. That's it. That's their
Uh-huh.
programming. And this one seagull, Jonathan Livingston Seagull is his name,
Uh-huh.
is trying to break free. So he's trying to break the record of the fastest seagull there is. And he keeps doing
Uh-huh.
that and all this stuff and ends up becoming enlightened and whatever.
Yeah.
But anyways, the God in that sense is the great goal. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course it would be.
yeah.
God has to be like them. Uh, a real life phenomenon that's kind of weird. Have you ever seen where they have those penguins that will just leave their flocks and just run to the center of Antarctica? Have you ever seen that before?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so obviously penguins are water birds. They need to be near the water to hunt because they eat fish. That's all they do in Antarctica. There's nothing else to eat in Antarctica. It's just literally seals and penguins down there and whales occasionally,
Yeah.
and tons of fish. But for some reason, it was a documentary. Uh, can't remember the name of it, but it was narrated by one of those European guys that has that awesome accent or whatever, like Norwegian or whatever. And there was a penguin, and they're all marching from where they're supposed to be, like, I don't know, like the nesting grounds or wherever, and they're all marching to the water to go in. And you see one penguin, and he walks up and he looks at the ocean, and then he turns around and looks at the mountains, and he just starts walking towards the mountains. They're like, what? We can't figure out what he's doing. And the rescuers, the first couple of times, they weren't rescuers. I can't remember if they were just like researchers in Antarctica or whatever. They'd grab the penguin and they'd go drag him back to the water and put him close. And he'd look around again and then he'd look at the mountains and he'd just run off again and run towards the mountains. These penguins are going to die, by the way. There's no food there. It's very harsh on the interior part of Antarctica. But it makes me wonder if that penguin didn't have a moment where he was like, I'm so tired of swimming and going into the water. Maybe there's something in those mountains it's worth living for. And
Yeah.
it could probably be a pretty good metaphor for people that abandon society and go live off in the woods in a cabin.
I definitely, man, I definitely feel that a lot of times, especially with my beliefs as they are, even in my own household at times,
Mm-hmm.
because my wife is Christian,
Yeah.
and so I've gotten to the point where I don't share my beliefs anymore. I just keep it to myself. But I mean, that's another reason why I created this platform is so I can find my
Mm-hmm.
tribe, if you will, of people who
Yeah.
are interested in the same kind of things and
Mm-hmm.
uh, raising their consciousness and all of that stuff. But it's the more you walk away from the masses, the lonelier it gets, and
Very true.
that hurts in the beginning,
Yeah.
and you don't have anybody to talk to about it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
but I've gotten to the point where I don't a lot of times I don't need to talk to anybody anymore. It's fun. I'm doing this because I want to, but
Yeah.
I don't really have to. Like I'm just trying to be the best version of myself and everybody can do as they wish. And I'm not trying to get into any religious battles with anybody because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I've found these awesome ideas. This is gonna save humanity. And then,
Mm-hmm.
nobody wants to hear it. You lose friends
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And it's like definitely gets or it's definitely isolating.
Yeah.
So
I've noticed that most of the people that end up changing their mind on a subject of religion or spirituality, it's almost never because someone else said something to them to change their mind. It's because they had a personal epiphany.
mhm.
I've almost never, I think I've only seen it once or twice where somebody was like, wait, you're right. That makes more sense. I like your idea better. Because most people just aren't willing to let go of what their belief system is, or they're not willing to give another person enough credit for what they believe in. So I don't, to be honest, I don't have a reason to try to convert anybody to my way of thinking, uh, other than to ask them to stop being hateful. Perhaps that's the only reason that I would even try to convince anybody. But I understand the loneliness aspect, because often going through life, it is lonely being who I am, because there's not really a whole lot of non-religious people in Arkansas. You can find them, they exist, and you can find people at least that are tolerant of you. But sometimes the struggles you have dealing with personal issues, you can't get anybody really to relate to them, because they would tell you to do something like pray to God or something like that. And I'm like, well, that does me a whole lot of good, doesn't it? Maybe give me some practical advice, like when I'm depressed, eat a bite of ice cream. And then I'm 300 pounds, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, I guess. I don't know.
It's, that's just like with quitting smoking, for example. You do
Yeah.
crack, and then
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
that was like a
That's right. Yeah.
Larry Engvall, I think. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
quit smoking and start
Yeah.
doing crack, and then
Yeah. Well, I
start
mean,
doing this to get off of crack, and
yeah. And next thing you know, yeah, only the thrill of feeling somebody die in my hands helped me get off cigarettes. Whatever. Yeah, it's a little bit extreme in that regard, isn't it? Uh, no, I've got a lot of coping mechanisms nowadays, so I don't feel challenged by life most of the time, other than just abject poverty, I guess. Sometimes I feel like I'm just excessively poor, but that's bad decisions for the most part. Like I don't really need to buy anything more for disc golf. I've got a big bin full of them, but I'm like, hey, guess what, man? Another disc sounds great. Just like another club sounds great. Like this will be the one that helps me break 80 today. It never is, man. It never is.
be careful with telling life, oh, it's too easy, and life is like, oh,
Oh yeah,
too
by the
easy,
way,
huh?
yeah, I'm going to challenge you. How would you like
Yeah.
some cancer today? Yeah. Okay, never mind. No, like I don't say it's easy. I just say I've got really
Yeah, I
good
know.
coping
I'm just,
mechanisms for it.
yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, don't worry. I'm not tempting fate. There's none of that nonsense. If fate exists, he can keep it. Just keep whatever hardships you got. I am not your strongest soldier, okay? There's some people out there that are great at dealing with stress, and I'm just like hanging on by a thread, like I'm
I
having to
think
disassociate.
I think that's bullshit too. I like, okay, some people are better at it at dealing with things than others, but I think we all put up that persona, like the Carl Jung persona, to
Mhm.
show like, oh yeah, everything's fine. That's how social media, has always been. It's like,
Yeah.
look how great my life is, but in reality, it sucks just like everybody else's. But then it
Yeah.
puts that vision out there that then
Yeah.
people start to believe that, like, man, my life sucks and their life is awesome, and it's not fair. It's reality is everybody's
Yeah.
life sucks. It's just different levels, and we all put our mask on and all this stuff, but we're all struggling.
Yeah, it's unrealistic expectations for sure at times. I I have a friend on Facebook. I don't rat out any of my friends, obviously,
Mm,
but if you were to just look at the pictures on Facebook, happiest person in the world,
mm.
there's just pictures of her kids and her, and every holiday being celebrated, and you'll see a little glass of wine in there every now and then or whatever, and then you're just going through the timeline and you say blah 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 has been divorced or something like that, recently divorced, and then there'll be another picture of her happy with her kids, and I'm like, what happened there? Why are there no pictures of the divorce? It's just all you and happy kids and stuff. I realize the social media effect is pretty extreme. You're
Mhm.
comparing somebody else's highlights to your everyday, and it's impossible to live up to that expectation.
That's
Yeah.
a great way to put it into words right there.
Yeah, it's impossible. I know that feeling all too well. I mean, I guess I could show everybody the highlights of my day, and it'd be like me mixing some Metamucil at night and smiling. Like it'd be me like getting a Snickers out of the machine at work, and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe me hopping into my car and the gas gauge is full. And there it is. Yeah, yeah, it's great. I only spent $45 on a tank of gas this week. Woo! Those are the highlights of my week. I don't have any Cancun pictures, unfortunately.
Well, what do you think, man? I think we're getting close to 3 hours, so you
Yeah,
want to
we
wrap it
talked
up?
it out, man. We've talked about everything and then some. Did you enjoy having me on the show?
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back. It's been awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to talk. We can figure out some other topics that maybe I'm kind of remotely relevant on, or ways that I tolerate reality. I don't know. Talk
There,
about that, I
there's a
guess.
lot of things that I had written down that we didn't even touch on. Stuff like
Yeah.
AI, and
Hmm.
is AI going to be our new god, and all this fun stuff.
It's a
But
possibility, man. Yeah, but we can definitely touch on it next time.
yeah, so if you will, tell everybody where they can find you with your YouTube and everything. So
Yeah, definitely. My YouTube is Adventure Time with Chuck, youtube.com/Adventure Chuck. I'm about to get back into making more videos. I'm off work this week, so I can kind of ease myself back into it. I've got a couple of segments that I'm working on. Obviously, I like to do the adventure thing. I like to see stuff that's interesting and kind of show it to people, but I'd also like to do some storytelling as well. And I kind of started off with a little storytelling, but I'm going to have to develop some ideas. But yeah, definitely subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate having people view what I'm putting out and have discussions with people in the comments.
that's awesome. All right. So thank you for joining me on this. Well, let me start that again. Thank you for joining us on this journey today with the Unifying Field podcast. We've touched on just a fraction of the vastness that connects us all, but remember, the exploration never ends. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and stay curious. As we part ways, may you carry a little more wonder, a little more peace, and a renewed sense of connection with the world around you. Until next time, take a deep breath, question everything, and remember, the infinite is always within reach. Please like and subscribe and share with anyone you think may enjoy this type of content.